so-called, I mean, both of his big tax cuts have gone to wealthy people, so it's probably been at least this term and the previous term before. 877-301-8970 is the number. Chuck from Brighton, thank you for calling.
Hello, Chuck.
Hey guys, I read this article about the IRS, and it was definitely jarring, but I think it's important to have historical context into what's going on and how it's been a goal of the right-wing donor class for the last 5 decades to disarm the IRS to its fullest capabilities. So while it's been supercharged under Trump, this is what they have been working for. And I wanted to bring in reference to a fantastic book that was written about 10 years ago by the investigative journalist Jane Mayer called Dark Money.
We have talked to her about this.
She's
one
great.
of the great, but she's been on to
But
talk.
go ahead.
It's brilliant. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, it really shows how these networks spearheaded by the Koch brothers have been working towards pushing these fringe libertarian ideologies that were fringe in the early 80s back into the 70s and making them main platforms of the Republican Party. And this is just the culmination, coming to fruition of what they've been working for so long, maybe even dating back as far back as the New Deal. So my point being is that this isn't just a Trump thing. This is a deeply embedded principle in the Republican Party through the Heritage Foundation, through ALEC, through Americans for
Agreed,
Prosperity.
but agree with all that. Would you not agree it's on steroids under Trump, Chuck?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would also
Absolutely.
say,
Chuck,
just
that was
one
a great
little
call.
small
Thanks. And
point,
Jane
Chuck.
Mayer's work is just unbelievable.
I think this started with Reagan. I don't think it was in the New Deal because people...
because of trickle-down economics.
Yes, which was a bunch of baloney, and baby boomers such as myself can remember when, Dad worked a job, modest job, you could buy a house, you could buy a car, you could have 2 weeks vacation in a cottage on Cape Cod, you could send your kids to college. The tax rates after World War II were like at 90% for the highest earners, 90%. And I believe when Reagan got there, they were something like 70 or 80%.
So.
JFK brought them down some, and then they went now they're 33 and something?
30-something, yeah. Do you remember what David Stockman, who was head of Office of Management and Budget under Reagan, did when he left and did interviews about trickle-down economics?
Did you say it was a bunch of baloney?
Yeah.
Well, it was a bunch of baloney, but people bought it. This idea that all these corporations give them these big breaks and they're going to hire all these people and everybody's going to have a great middle-class life. I mean, obviously the middle class is shrinking in America. People can't afford college, they can't afford homes, they can't afford anything, and the income inequality has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So, but I think it started with Reagan.
By the way, YouTube is working.
Oh, good.
Thank you for all who made that happen. YouTube is back up working. Go ahead.
Steve in Cambridge, thank you for calling.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Good.
I got to give you guys a hard time because, like I said, I got a $4,800 tax credit on no tax on overtime. That's the working class people. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime was a Republican thing. Not one Democrat voted for that.
Steve, before you continue, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm not going to cut you off. I just want to say you're using the wrong term. It is not no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. It is no tax on some tips and no tax on some overtime, and it pales as a percentage of income compared to what the wealthiest Americans are getting. But continue.
Listen, I got a $4,800 tax credit. So that's $4,800 that the Democrats weren't going to give me. You're a 1%er, Jim. Are you paying more than you're supposed to?
No.
Are you offering to pay higher taxes?
No.
Of course you're not, because you're paying what you're required to pay. Just like the millionaires and billionaires.
Steve, actually, but in fairness, when I used to do tax reform work, I worked pretty hard to try to raise tax rates through graduated income tax on higher income earners in Massachusetts. And by the way, Steve, what troubles me about your call, and I'm sure what you say is totally factually accurate about the $4,800 tax credit you've got, is the whole value of that tax cut, most of which didn't go to people like you, was $1 trillion. Are you worried about what the federal government now can't pay for because they decided to tilt the tax system so heavily to the wealthiest people in this country? Does that concern you at all, or just the $4,800?
No, you know why? You know why? Because the government always finds money when they want to spend $100 billion in Ukraine or they want to do some war. They always find money somehow when they want to. So I'm not worried about that in the least. You always have all these organizations on your show, and they always talk about how, these big donors are sponsoring, are paying for all this stuff. Well, those big donors, guess what? They're the millionaires and billionaires that are given to all these organizations that help. You always want to criticize millionaires and billionaires, but you know what? They're following the laws.
Well, by the way, for what it's worth, Steve, there's a billionaire who is not following the laws, if you read the New York Times, and he's the guy who gave you your $4,800 tax cut. So we respect your opinion. We have a disagreement, but I'm glad you got $4,800, and I'm glad it makes you happy. Steve, thanks.
Let me ask you, what Democrat voted for it?
By the way, if I were a member of Congress, just so it's clear, I would have voted against the $1 trillion tax cut, too.
The thing is, it's a small number of people are
Steve, thanks for the call.
A small number of people are getting help, and millions of people are losing their health care, they're losing Medicaid, they're losing SNAP. So I think, with all due respect, it was a scam, like most everything else that goes on here. Anyway, coming up, we're going to talk with Shannon O'Brien. She is right now running the Cannabis Control Commission, but the legislature is overhauling the whole thing, so we're going to find out about that. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy, listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The runners, the crowd, the excitement. Marathon Monday is coming, and GBH News is keeping you informed with everything you need to know about the 130th Boston Marathon. Who's going to be there? Interesting facts and history, runner superstitions, and, of course, live race updates. Find us at gbhnews.org, on the GBH News app, or right here on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Revision Energy, a renewable energy company building and servicing solar, batteries, and air source heat pumps for local homes and businesses for over 20 years. Revision Energy. Revision your power. More at revisionenergy.com. And Direct Federal Credit Union, a Needham-based financial institution providing loans, saving solutions, and financial wellness resources for members across every stage of life. Learn more by visiting direct.com. Direct Federal, member NCUA.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're live at the library. Did I say that? I think I did.
Yes, you did.
On the 28th of April, 11 to 12 will be the governor for Ask the Governor, Maura Healey, and 12 to 1 will be Mayor Wu for Ask the Mayor. To say there's been turmoil at the Mass Cannabis Control Commission over time is an understatement. The latest drama, there's a new bill sitting on Governor Healey's desk, which passed the House and Senate, reduced the size of the commission from 5 members to 3, all appointed by the governor, and lots of other changes too. The governor was here this morning outside to participate in the wreath-laying ceremony. Marjorie and I asked her if she'd be signing that bill. She said, well, she had some issues. She would be signing it. She has till the 19th to do that. So what's that mean for our next guest, and what has she been doing now that she's back as the chair of the commission? That would be Shannon O'Brien. Shannon O'Brien, Commission Chair, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much for coming in. But I must admit, I'm a little bit confused. You are the Commission Chair now, but the legislature has just overhauled the Commission, going to go from 5 members to 3, and it sounds like the appointment's going to be made, but the governor's going to change a lot. So is this what is going on? Are you going to hold on to your job, or what?
You know, can I tell you, if it's measured by effectiveness, and if I am going to pat myself on the back, which my right hand is a little bit sore because I am patting myself on the back, we've gotten more done in the last 6 months since I have returned than they have in the past 5 years.
By the way, we should say you were fired by the treasurer, you sued, you won, and you were reinstated with back pay.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is the problem. And if you talk to any of the licensees, they will say nothing was getting done for the 2 years that I was suspended and I was fired. And we wasted millions of public dollars. But I've been trying to be forward-looking. And since I've come back, the social consumption lounges, that was being studied for 3 years. We got that done within a matter of a couple of months.
That's the pot cafe.
Explain to those.
The pot cafe. Now, again, that was something that was voted on by the people of the Commonwealth. It was a law that was passed, so we had to put in place regulations that basically interpret how the law. So we've actually have working groups right now that are helping municipalities because a lot of the power has to be opted in. No community can just do it. It has to be opted in either by, I think, town meeting or by the city council. And we are working with public health and safety to make sure that they have transportation plans so that people get home safely, that we have limits on sales.
When's the first one going to open?
It depends on what happens with this bill, because we have working groups, and I think that there are many good things in the bill. The biggest concern that I have, and I think that this may be one of the concerns that the governor has, is that going from 5 to 3 commissioners means that we can't collaborate outside. We have to do everything.
Explain that.
So open meeting does not allow deliberation and consideration of public actions outside of if there's a quorum of people. So right now, 5 commissioners. A quorum is 2. So that means that 2 people can talk and collaborate and work together. We have working groups of 2 commissioners. Commissioners Stebbins and Roy are looking at how we're going to limit how often licensees have to renew. That's an added cost. We're looking at red tape reduction. So all of these working groups would probably come to a halt for quite some time, because we're going to have to figure out, and what that means is if there's only 3 commissioners, that 2's a quorum.
Oh, yeah.
So 2 can never talk. And I will point out, if I can just point out, MCAD just went from 3 to 5 commissioners because they had problems with open meeting law violations.
I think in fairness to the governor, and I don't think this is telling a tale out of school, she did, when she was talking to us when she was leaving the building, she did voice a concern about exactly that issue. She did not say the following. Maybe she sends it back to say it shouldn't be 3, it should be 5. All appointed by her. Were you consulted by either the legislature or the governor in this process?
I'm not by the legislature, but again,
by the governor?
This is not, no one has asked me for my opinion about how this should function.
Do you find that odd?
No, I mean,
yes, you do.
I think that the commissioners are probably well suited to inform, and that's why since I've returned, and by the way, I will say that when I first was appointed, I had meetings with both chairs of the legislative committees that ultimately, this is 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So I guess I did consult with them, and I said to them that the laws as they are right now create some internal conflicts. It is clear from the statute that the chair has great authority, and I would assume that maybe I did inform this part of the new law. Years ago, which is the chair, if you want the chair to have the authority, you need to make it more explicit. And that is one of the things that they put in the bill. So I'll take it back. I was consulted.
So would you, if Governor Healy, would you reach out to Governor Healy, say you'd like, under this new format, assuming she signs this into law, she said she would, I'd like to continue as chair?
How about this? I think that the governor needs to take some time, and I think she's going to make the best decision. And, to let folks know, this is a $1.65 billion a year industry. It's the largest agricultural crop in the entire state. More revenues come back from cannabis products than come from alcohol. And so, and there are 15,000 jobs. Just last week, Pure Oasis, which is a social equity, which is generally persons who've been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs.
Which the statute speaks to.
They
the
just
voters
closed down.
Yeah.
They were $2 million in debt. We're supposed to be getting some funds from the state cannabis fund run by the governor's office, but they closed their doors. Another company, Rasta Roots, another social equity here in Boston, a $4.2 million investment that supports social equity persons, they closed down. Just last month in Grafton, there was discerned cannabis purveyors in Grafton, just closed up, walked away. So my biggest concern right now, and I think that this is also the concern of the governor, is that we cannot stop the momentum that we've had since I've come back. We have been addressing problems. How do we, they sold more, the gross revenues from cannabis went up last year, but their profits are going down. And so this is what I and my fellow Commissioner Stebbins and Roy and Benetton are trying to do right now, which is get rid of red tape. Are there regulations that we can get rid of that cuts on the overhead but doesn't compromise public health and safety? Like we have an architectural review fee. We charge $1,500 to review your architectural plan, but we don't have any architects on staff. So why are we charging that?
What about the money? I remember at the beginning of this whole thing, these companies had to pay a lot of money to the towns they were going to,
host agreement
which
thing.
seemed like a real scam to me. Is that still happening?
No, and the legislature clarified that. But this is also why you need bold leadership at the commission. You know, Shalene Title, I think she used to come back here. Shalene Title was one of the original commissioners. And
she also drafted the provision in the ballot question in 2016 around social equity.
Yes. So Shalene was pushing to say the commission should weigh in, and I think that our former executive director did not think that was a good idea. But we had an opportunity as a commission to tell the communities, no, this is what the statute is. And you can only get money for these very limited things. And you have to prove a clear and direct relationship to what you are charging for and what this business, like in Holyoke, I know my own Senate district, one of the things that they used was they actually used some funds to improve water and sewer. Well, cannabis cultivation requires a lot of water and sewage. So that's actually a rational relationship. But the city of Boston, just last year, had to return significant funds because they couldn't make that connection between what the impact from the businesses were with the fees that they charged. So now you have lawsuits all over the place right now. If we had done it in the first place, if we had been bold enough to say, we're going to step in here, we're going to make a statement, we're going to give these communities guidance, it not only would have clarified things so you don't have communities now in either lawsuits or having to give back money, but also what happened was there was a pay-to-play mentality in the beginning, and we've seen some elected officials get in trouble. But that pay-to-play mentality also harmed social equity. And I have talked to people in
because they couldn't afford it?
Because because they couldn't make the better deal.
Okay, and the social equity front, I remember when we were debating whether people were going to vote for this or not, one of the things that people thought was a justice kind of issue is that so many kids of color went to jail for smoking marijuana. Meanwhile, I don't know many white people that went to jail.
That's what disproportionately impacts me.
But it seems like Pure Oasis was a black-owned business. And this other company is black-owned. So it seems like the black-owned businesses are taking the hit here, and the social equity that people hope for is not happening.
Well, and that was one of the things when I first joined. I said, how can we make social equity work better for those persons? You know, we have a very small percentage of licenses that are owned by either social equity or economic empowerment, which I won't get into it, but they're basically the similar cohort. What can we do to help them? And you know, that is something that we still have not met the mission.
Wait a second. You said a minute ago when you were answering Marjorie's question about this Pure Oasis that a governor's fund was supposed to help bail out Pure Oasis and didn't.
No. So this is what Chapter 180 did in 2022. It also said, hey, Commission, you have to now look at these host community agreements and make sure that they are fair and they have a rational relationship to the impact of what the business. So that was one of the things that it did. The other thing that it did is it created a fund. The legislature created a fund. Now, it's supposed to help those businesses, and there are a number of businesses, social equity, that are expanding. A company that I met out in Holyoke not that long ago, they're going to be doing infused chocolates, and they're using that to build out.
Why didn't it help Pure Oasis, that fund?
Because I don't think that they had received those funds yet.
You know, you didn't answer the question. You didn't answer my question from 5 minutes ago. Would you like to be the chair of the commission under the new law?
I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I'm going to get done what I can. And again, this is a decision.
That's not my question. Would you like to be chair of the commission under the new law?
I'm not sure. I want to see how this is going to be structured. And I will tell you, if it goes from 5 to 3, I do think that being chair, there's going to be a lot more power. But it also, what I have really enjoyed and liked is the collaboration and work that I've done with my fellow, like Commissioner Roy. One of the things that she was fighting for that wasn't happening in the 2 years that I was gone is data transparency. And why data transparency is important is we have seen widespread testing fraud in Massachusetts. The licensees are begging us to get rid of the fraud because they say, I have many people saying, I can't compete against the cheaters. If someone has falsified THC levels, and all of there's a generation closer in age to mine, and we weren't looking at THC a long time ago. It was a very different thing. Now that's how you price this.
Right.
So we've seen inflated THC levels, and Commissioner Roy, working with her, we now have an open database. Working with Commissioner Roy, we had a conversation just about a week or so ago with the Attorney General's office. And one of the things that we've said is when these testing labs that may be putting out fraudulent COAs, certificates of analysis, and if that certificate of analysis says there's 32% THC, so you pay the higher price, but you're getting 24% THC, I think that could be a potential Chapter 93A violation. And so we have brought this to the Attorney General.
Consumer protection, is that?
Yes, consumer protection. So
let's get back to this Pure Oasis thing. So it sounds like what you're telling me, they're way in debt. They hadn't paid taxes. They're in a mess. So they're shutting down. But are you telling me that the reason they're shutting down is because the money that was promised
No, this is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that every single licensee in Massachusetts is faced with the same economic problems.
Except some of them are big companies which have multiple licenses, and they're going to make that more likely. They can go
double
from 3
the
to 6.
number of places they can own
which
under
seems
the
to me to
legislation.
favor big companies and not small companies.
That's the decision of the legislature.
Okay.
So
that
within my perch, it's looking at this, and so just to answer.
I'm asking you why the social justice people, so many of them have failed. That's what I'm asking you.
Because I think it's harder for those persons to access capital.
And it sounds like it's harder to get money from the state that they're supposed to.
So in 2022, the legislature did a great thing. They clarified this host community agreement debacle, right? And they told the commission, you have to start telling people whether or not these are compliant host community agreements. They also set up this fund recognizing that social equity applicants have a harder time accessing capital. So that fund was put in place to help social equity applicants.
So did they get the fund money
There's been one tranche was announced back in 2024, and this most recent tranche of applicants, some of that money is getting out there right now, but I don't want to lay that at, that fund is put in place, but it's almost like the problems that are in the cannabis industry are so huge right now. You're going to see there are 30 licensees that are in receivership. I have been told there's another 30 more heading in that direction. And so this is why, since I've been back, that's what I've been focused on. One, making sure we protect public health and safety, going after testing fraud, going after the cheaters. If you're lying about THC, you shouldn't be in business. You shouldn't be unfairly competing. If you're allowing arsenic to be found in products, you should not be in business. So we've been doing a much better job of holding those people accountable. But two, what can we do to cut?
Why do we need cops outside of every pot store?
That's above my pay grade.
Okay, that's another ridiculous thing.
That's
Do we have
true.
a,
Can I
cop outside of a liquor store?
Excuse me, this is really important
That's the
here.
statute, not the...
We have covered about 1/100th of what we intended to talk to you about. Can you come back before the 19th if we are able to schedule you to continue this conversation? Well, we're done. We were done. Is the answer a yes?
Sure.
Okay.
We have a meeting tomorrow.
Oh, how about then later this week or early next week before the 19th?
Okay.
Oh, the 19th is Sunday. If your person, we're out of time and we barely touched anything we wanted to touch, and I'm assuming there's a lot more you want to talk about.
What I want you to do is, I've given this to Marjorie, you take a look at our agenda for this meeting tomorrow. We're fixing the tip line. We're updating the change of ownership process. We're working on red tape removal. We're creating a definition of licensee in good standing. We're improving the data use agreement form. We're voting on a cultivation freeze. We're publicizing receivership reporting forms because there's a lot of receiverships. We're looking at non-enforcement of some of the laws that are in place that the legislature is already working on. So all I'm saying is that if we can get through half of this tomorrow,
we're going to reschedule you regardless of what happens in terms of the governor signing. Shannon O'Brien, I'm sorry we didn't get any further, but this is pretty important.
I talk a lot.
Well, no, that's not you. There's a lot to talk about. We'll continue. See you in a few days. Shannon O'Brien, thank you so much for your time.
We've been speaking with the chair of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, Shannon O'Brien. Coming up after this quick break, the ACLU's Kade Crockford joins us to talk about data privacy, how Big Brother could be surveilling you at things like the No Kings rallies or almost any place else. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. Listen to BPR, GBH, and any PM from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Sharks Come Cruisin drops anchor at our Boston Public Library studio for live music. The Providence Band has built its sound around sea shanties, maritime songs, and the kind of communal energy that demands a sing-along. Plus, this year marks 100 years since Robert Goddard launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in Auburn, Massachusetts. And Museum of Worcester is marking the space age centennial with a new show. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And PNC Bank, who believes when you pay attention to the details, amazing things can happen. Like when you check the pockets of a jacket you haven't worn since last fall and find $20. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. And Speakeasy Stage, presenting Swept Away. 4 New Bedford whalers must confront who they are and what they've done as they fight to survive a shipwreck, with music by the Avett Brothers. Opens April 24th. SpeakeasyStage.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. By the way, I know a lot of you care about the Cannabis Control Commission. So do we. We just ran out of time. We are going to make sure that Shannon O'Brien returns in the next handful of days to continue that conversation. Trust us. Did I say Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy? Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library on Friday for Live Music Friday and beyond. And on Tuesday, the 28th, Governor for the first hour, Mayor Wu for the second. On the eve of the No Kings protest last month, Marjorie read a text from someone who texted into the show asking about her own grown kids' safety. Let me read you the text. It was March 27th. Here's something, this is Marjorie speaking, reading it. Here's something I hadn't even considered, but somebody just texted, this is Margaret, and she's a boomer, but her 30-ish kids are conscious and concerned about the Trump surveillance state being able to know exactly who's attending protests and building databases that are going to perhaps follow them for the rest of their lives. Listening to that texter on the other end of the radio was our next guest, someone who can hopefully answer all of our questions and yours about protecting your data privacy in these kinds of settings. Kade Crockford is director of the Technology for Liberty program at the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Kade, as always, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you too. Thanks, Jim.
So, how are we? I said before we went on the air, I'm a little nervous after reading all this material about this surveillance. So, how are we being watched?
Oh, let me count the ways. We are being watched by innumerable companies that, frankly, most people have never even heard of. I mean, that was so striking to me when I started digging into this industry. You know, we're familiar with Google and Meta and Amazon and Microsoft, these companies whose products we use all the time. These companies are obviously collecting a lot of information about us, but through the online surveillance advertising industry, there's also grown up in the shadows this shadow marketplace of staffed essentially by companies that nobody has ever heard of that siphon information off of our cell phones, for example, including precise geolocation data. So that's information showing where we are 24 hours a day. And then they repackage this data, taken from many different sources, and sell it to anybody with a credit card who wants to buy it. So, when I heard that commenter on your show raising concerns about the Trump administration potentially being able to access information showing who, for example, was at the No Kings protest, I thought, well, they're exactly right. That's exactly what the federal government is doing right now. In fact, ICE is one of the buyers of these data.
And by the way, just so I'm clear, when they that data, the companies that most of whom we haven't heard of, other than the big ones, when they're collecting that data, is that theoretically, I don't know if this is even a word, anonymized? You know what I mean? Is it attached to us or no?
That's a great question. So at the beginning of this debate, we launched this campaign in Massachusetts 4 years ago. And at the beginning of the debate, some of these location data brokers would say, oh, don't worry, the information's all anonymous. Well, that's garbage. It's complete nonsense. And the reason is there is even if your name, Jim, or your cell phone number is not tied to these data, there is a persistent identifier tied to your phone. So it's an advertising ID or something of that nature. And that's because they want to see that this information is valuable. It wouldn't be valuable to them if they couldn't track, your precise location data to you as a consumer. That's the whole point of this industry. So essentially, the reason why it's not possible to anonymize location data is that you come here on a routine schedule, right? You also go to your house, I imagine, every night and stay there between the hours of maybe midnight and 5 a.m.
We're not sure, actually.
Well,
check the data.
Let me
You'll
just
find
say,
out.
most people have those, regular life patterns where at night they're home, in the daytime on a consistent basis or on some consistent basis they're at work. And if you even know one of those data points about someone, it's absolutely trivial to identify them. So the answer is no. Location data cannot be anonymized.
Okay, and
You
so
know what I
when,
wanted?
I'm
Just
sorry.
wanted to get because during when we saw the pictures on the ice, mostly in Minnesota, the ice race, how ICE agents would follow John or Jane Doe home that had been a protester, and they knew who they were, and they called them Susie or Jimmy or whatever. That was from their phones?
Well, so in some cases, that's actually an additional creepy technology. ICE has adopted this technology called Mobile Fortify, which is a facial recognition platform that's on the smartphones that ICE agents have.
Okay.
And so you've seen cases where, people will be saying, F you, get out of my community, and the ICE agent will go up and take a picture of the person
Yes.
and then say, oh, Jim, and read their address and say, good luck getting on TSA PreCheck. And then it turns out, the next week, they're blocked from accessing, privileges at the airport.
So when we want to get to some
incredible?
preventive things, but not right now with one exception. When I decline cookies, which I do every opportunity that I can figure out to do it, what we read this morning is the vast majority of companies that ask you if you want to decline ignore your declination, even if that's the box you click on.
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that because this whole framework that, mostly comes from the initial version of the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which was Europe's attempt to regulate these technology companies and their voracious appetites for our data. The beginnings of that framework really focused on what we call a notice and consent model, which basically says, companies have to provide this pop-up box when you visit their website that says you have a bunch of privacy choices, and if you actually ever click, examine my choices, my God, it's like it would take you all day to read through it. You can click something, sure. The degree to whether or not that's adhered to is a sort of open debate. I think, there are some questions with that study. But we in Massachusetts are thinking about a different framework for data privacy, one that doesn't put the burden on you as the technology user to have a PhD in information science and the law, but instead puts the burden on the company so that the company is limited in terms of how much information it's allowed to collect about you in statute.
That's the thing that your colleague Carol Rose has been talking about, spending on Beacon
That's
Hill.
right.
What would that thing do? And I think the Senate unanimously approved it as months and months ago.
In
I don't
September.
know and you'll tell us what the House is doing in a minute. What would that bill do should it become law?
So essentially what we've asked lawmakers to do is really three things with respect to data privacy. The first is this data minimization framework. So it basically says, to Google, other companies, you can collect data about me, but only if it's necessary to provide me, the consumer, with the service that I've requested. So stop collecting extraneous stuff that doesn't benefit me.
Give me an example of what would be relevant.
Sure. So if I, go to a website and I buy something and I enter my email address because I want to get a receipt and documentation of shipping and things of that nature, then collecting my email address is required in order to provide me with the service that I've requested from that company. But collecting my biometric data, information about the searches that I've made on Google through cookies, about my health, that's not necessary in order to sell me a pair of shoes, right? So the companies would be prohibited from doing that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and the Senate did that. The Senate includes strong language on data minimization. The second thing we've asked lawmakers to do is to ban the sale entirely of a category of information that we're calling sensitive data. So that would include things like precise geolocation data, the information from your cell phone showing where you are 24 hours a day. It would include biometric data, to the point about ICE and facial recognition, children's information, information about your health, religious information about your worship. So those types of data would be prohibited entirely from sale, and the Senate did that as well. The third thing that we want the legislature to do is to ensure that these protections are backed by robust enforcement, meaning we want a private right of action. We want people to be able to sue to enforce their own rights in court, and unfortunately the Senate did not do that. In terms of enforcement, the Senate said the Attorney General will be the lone actor who's responsible for enforcing these protections. And so we're basically working with the House now on similar legislation. They're very hard at work on that legislation, and we're hopeful.
Is that serious that they're hard at work?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Just being
No,
nice to
I'm
them?
completely serious. They're taking it really seriously, yeah.
You know, I know you're talking about Massachusetts, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the AI company Anthropic, this is what they did not want. They did not want their technology to be used for mass surveillance domestically. And then the Trump administration said, forget it, we're not dealing with you. And then they went to AI. Do we know what the other...
OpenAI.
OpenAI, excuse me. Do we know what they're doing? Are they into mass surveillance over at OpenAI, or do we not know?
I mean, look, you know, what Sam Altman has said is that they are going to engage with the federal government as far as lawful surveillance authorities are concerned. You know, you talk to any expert who's looked at NSA surveillance, FBI surveillance in the wake of 9/11, and the federal government has a very elastic definition of what constitutes lawful surveillance. So we have significant concerns about that, and Anthropic was aware of that and thought, you know, we don't like that wishy-washy stuff. We're talking no mass surveillance of Americans' communications, and that's, you know, not something that the Trump administration was going to agree to.
That's the voice of Kade Crockford, the director of the Technology for Liberty program at the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Obviously, if you care about this, and you should, call your legislator, particularly your House member, and tell them to move this thing. You know, you mentioned when you were talking to Marjorie a few minutes ago, Kate, about an ICE agent being able to take your picture and then all of a sudden, hi, Jim, or whatever it is. Mark Zuckerberg essentially seems like he wants to work for ICE someday. We all know about those glasses. We talked about them ad nauseum, the ones that, well, you can explain what they are in a minute. But beyond the primary function that some people find so appealing, they apparently are also looking about integrating face recognition technology. So describe both of those nightmares.
Yeah, so this is a key example of why it's so important that Massachusetts lawmakers pass data privacy legislation. You know, Meta has these glasses. They're made by Ray-Ban and Oakley, which was actually a very clever move on Mark Zuckerberg's part because those brands have a good reputation and Meta doesn't. So, you know, when you see them, it doesn't say Meta on the side. It says Ray-Ban. Clever. In any event, the technology in them is meta technology. It's AI, and they are basically using AI to interpret the world and what people see. You can ask them questions. Apparently, they're not very good at answering them, but regardless, a memo was leaked, an internal company memo in February to the New York Times, to Kashmir Hill, their tech reporter. And that memo said a few things that are extremely alarming. The first thing it said is, we're going to roll out facial recognition on these glasses, which would enable anyone wearing them to pull up the name and potentially other personal information of anyone they look at. On the bus, in a doctor's office, you know, in other sensitive locations, in places like watching people walk into a synagogue and clock in the names of everybody who's worshiping. So that's one thing the memo said. The other thing, and this really, really irked me quite a bit, is it said, I'm paraphrasing, now's a perfect opportunity for Meta to release this product because all the annoying civil rights groups that would ordinarily yell at us about this are too busy fighting the Trump administration's abuses of power, so let's do it now. So as you can imagine, that upset me greatly.
What's the status of this?
So just on Monday, actually, we, with the National ACLU and our partners at the New York Civil Liberties Union, released a public letter to Mark Zuckerberg and to the CEO of the parent company of Ray-Ban and Oakley, essentially saying, don't you dare release this product on our society. This is going to harm the most vulnerable people in our communities. Women and girls, I think, are going to be the obvious targets of this. It's kind of the perfect technology for stalkers and creeps. Yeah. And so we got over 75 organizations, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, leading anti-domestic violence organizations, including Jane Doe here in Massachusetts, but a really big nationwide coalition of groups signed this letter to say, don't you dare do this to us. You know, our society is already sort of fracturing and breaking apart, and this could really accelerate a lot of the problems that we have in terms of interpersonal violence and the fragility of our democracy.
You know, the only good news out of all this stuff seems to be like in Congress, and there are no Republicans here for all intents and purposes. Particularly some conservative Republicans care as much about this as liberal Democrats do on the federal level. Not that they've done anything, but they do, right?
I'll just say, you know, the ACLU works on some issues that are genuinely politically controversial. Privacy is not one of them.
Yeah, it shouldn't
You know,
be.
privacy is something that people left, right, and center value, and people want to see legislation passed both at the state level and at the federal level to codify our privacy rights.
And let me just say, some nights I am home from 12 to 5, and other nights I may be away. We only have a couple minutes left. Wired ran a great piece in January that, and I'm sure this is something you talk about too, about how average people who are going to a protest or something like that texter that Marjorie read can protect themselves. Can you, in 90 seconds, give us a couple of easy things normal people could do?
Sure. So one thing I would recommend that everyone do is, as you said, call your state rep and tell them that you want them to pass strong, enforceable consumer privacy legislation as soon as possible, because these are not problems ultimately that we can deal with independently, and we have to use our democracy to address them collectively. But one thing that you can do as an individual is use an app like Signal to communicate safely. So that's a free, easily downloadable app that's available on the Android store,
Right, if Pete
and the Apple
Hegseth
Store.
can use it, anybody
That's
can
right.
use it, right?
And
Exactly.
you can turn on disappearing messages so that your messages are somewhat ephemeral. This is something that's super easy. The only thing that's required is that the other person that you're communicating with also have the app downloaded. And you can use really nice emojis to react to your friends' messages as well.
You know, one last thing. We're
actually.
almost out of time here, but we were talking the other day about how college kids have been afraid to protest. And, you know, this, what are you laughing at?
Jamie just wrote, I would love to have Jim's messages disappear from my phone.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know if this is part of it at all, but it seems like they're afraid of paying a price. And then they're going to get reprimanded by the school, or they're going to get expelled, or maybe they're worried about this. Their IDs taken down, and it carries with them their whole life.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the reasons that the work that we do at the ACLU, I think, is so important is because we focus on all of these different aspects together.
Yeah.
There is obviously a massive First Amendment issue with the government collecting data about everybody who's going to a protest or everybody who's going to a religious service, right? So, yeah, people have a reason to be concerned, but the answer to that is to get more engaged politically, to fix our democracy, not to take a step back.
Kate, thank you very much for coming in.
You know, one of
This
your
is
great skills, you can bring this to a level that
Yes, you
normal
can.
people cannot. You're really quite something. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks,
Great
Jim.
to
Kate
see
Crockford
you.
is Director of the Technology for Liberty program at the ACLU of Massachusetts. We say goodbye to those listening to you on NEPM. Thank you for tuning in to us. At 3 o'clock, the great Khalees and Monty with the fabulous 413. That is again at 3 o'clock at NEPM. We're going to keep going here in Boston. Coming up after this quick break, we're going to talk to Harvard national security expert Juliette Kayyem on what Viktor Orban's big defeat in Hungary means for us, Trump Jesus, and a New York Times investigation into Kristi Noem and her apparent favorite song, Hot Mama. Juliette Kayyem is next.
Experience a fusion of Puerto Rican jazz rhythms live at GBH on April 30th. Listen to the Emmy-nominated cuatrista Fabiola Mendez. Tickets at gbh.org/events.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Cornerstone at Canton. They offer seniors the privacy and independence of their own apartment and a community with care and support options to help meet needs now and as they age in place. CornerstoneCanton.com.
And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we are broadcasting from the Boston Public Library. We're going to be back here at the library on Friday with Live Music Friday, an upcoming date, April 28th. That's a Tuesday. We're going to have a twofer here. We're going to have Maura Healey, the governor, with us from 11 to noon, and then Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, with us from noon to 1. Hello again, Jim.
Can we say what we're doing on May 1st, or we can't? Not allowed to say it yet? We can?
Oh, this is a big
Actually,
one.
for the second time ever, we're going to have a third co-host
Yes.
for a day. We did it with Keith Lockhart, I don't know, 6 months ago. And our co-host on May Day will be Ken Casey, the front guy of the Dropkick Murphys. Not only, can I say more? Not only is Ken going to be our third co-host, he's booked the whole damn show.
He has.
And the guests are spectacular.
Michael Fanone, one of the police officers.
One of the law enforcement officers on January 6th.
Yep.
I mean, a whole bunch of wonderful people. We'll tell you what it is. But again, May 1st at the library live, Ken Casey will be our third co-host, and we're really, really excited about it. We're joined now on Zoom by national security expert Juliette Kayyem. Juliette is a former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and CNN Senior National Security Analyst. Hello there, Juliette.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Sorry I'm not there.
Oh, that's
we're glad
okay.
to have you anyway.
So, Juliette, we're going to talk to you about what the victory of Viktor Orban means to the United States.
He lost.
He lost, that's right.
He lost.
His spectacular loss. Sorry. His terrible loss. Well, not terrible. I'm glad he lost. Anyway, but before we get to that, I wanted to play a little sound of J.D. Vance calling President Trump during his speech when he went over to campaign for Viktor Orban. There was a hiccup at the start. Here's how it went.
I actually had a special guest that asked that I give him a phone call, and we'll see. Let's hope he actually answers, but this is going to be very embarrassing. All right.
I'm sorry, the person you were trying to reach has a voicemail box that has not been sent out yet.
Okay. Try one more time.
Ultimately, he did get through. By the way, it was 5 days before the election.
Yeah, poor J.D. Vance is not having a good couple of weeks. But anyway, when you read more about Viktor Orban, you see that it was kind of like the playbook for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That he got
it really
clobbered.
was. I mean, it was overtaking the intellectual apparatus, the political apparatus, as well as the media apparatus. And it's funny, I was just going to correct you when you said poor J.D. Vance, because I think what we're learning with this transition and the new leadership in terms of the approach to transparency, to media, I think the Orban had been funding CPAC, the conservative organization here in the United States, which has now ended. The new leader has fired the president, which I think is just not a political role, but it basically met with him and said, "You can quit, or you're going to get fired when I come on board." I think it's the not ready to make nice attitude, which in hindsight, perhaps the United States, not Democrats or Republicans, but the United States should have done after Donald Trump was implicated in the insurrection on January 6th. Instead, we sort of move forward as if this thing would go away. And I think what you're seeing is a very different model. So we don't feel bad for J.D. Vance, right? I mean, in others, why do we feel? I know you were just joking, but like that is going to be the attitude, and I think that's going to have a lot of resonance, depending on where we are in the country in 2008. I think the idea that Biden had, which was we're going to move forward, not back, it doesn't work when you have a sort of authoritarian element in the opposition party. I think the second thing I want to say is, the new administration in Hungary is not liberal. It is not progressive. It is anti-corruption.
Yeah.
And that focus on how Orban used the levers of power for himself, for his leadership to remain in power. That was the message that had resonance.
And his family, everybody got rich. Or not everybody,
yeah, so
but
maybe it has little to do with democracy, which is sort of sort of hard to grasp. And people can grasp Donald Trump Jr. joining the board of a drone factory that then gets $100 million of work from the Pentagon, and the company has been around less than a year. People get that. Yeah. And I think that's something that we have to manage and monitor and consistently focus on.
I lost you for about 10 seconds, but one of the things that the new prime minister-elect of Hungary also said that we would permit, I don't know if that's the appropriate verb, an independent media, which obviously didn't exist. Everybody says, he was the model for Trump. I mean, I think a slightly smarter version of Trump, but a model throughout the world, needless to say. What's the impact of Orban's defeat, though, in Europe? I mean, the most significant thing to me is he was the major obstacle to helping Ukraine. But even Putin figured out it was a good idea to congratulate the winner, even though the United States, to my knowledge, has not. What does this mean for Europe and Ukraine, or Orban's defeat?
I mean, I think it's wonderful for a European Union because Orban was the stickler in the alliance, in particular, the NATO alliance, and so this is going to help Ukraine. I think it's going to strengthen the EU and NATO. I mean, look, I'm not to do a whirlwind around the world, but Israel is now threatening a NATO ally, Turkey. That's like unheard of, right? I mean, if you follow what's going on in Israel, everyone anticipates that if Netanyahu has to continue war, it's going to be Turkey. I mean, his foreign minister and foreign defense establishment is talking about that. So I think that this is a unified force. I think it shows, to the extent that this right-wing authoritarian element exists in all these countries, France, and Italy, of course, I think it shows a path away from that, and it shows how to campaign. I mean, I think that they hit the streets every day. They did not rely on traditional media because they couldn't. Yeah. They relied on getting out and banging on doors.
Yeah, they went to a lot of little rural areas too, which is something that John King was talking about. Yeah. How Democrats don't do that in the United States anymore.
Yeah, and so, I think it suggests for the Democratic Party. I mean, I don't want to. The analogies are so different, and we have a two-party system or whatever. But I think it does suggest that whoever wants to win, so I don't know who gets the nomination, is going to be someone outside of that apparatus. I mean, in other words, because you need an attitude of not making nice. And I agree with that now. And I will take the hit for this. I was a little bit of, I wanted to prosecute after January 6th. I wanted to go after them, but I don't think I even captured the magnitude of the authoritarian element within MAGA until it was too late.
Well, beyond the authoritarian element, let's talk about another element. I don't know what the adjective that goes with it. This past week where Trump attacks the Pope repeatedly and then becomes Trump Jesus. One of the beauties of the Trump administration, beyond their deceit, is they can't even coordinate their lies. Here is Donald Trump lying about what he really meant with that image, and then J.D. Vance, who I guess no one spoke to explain what the appropriate lie was, lying about the lie. Here are the two of them.
Yeah. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and it had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support.
I think the president was posting a joke, and of course he took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that.
And Melania said, whatever. In any case, is there a significance? You think this is a deeper kind of symbolic of something deeper than just Donald Trump attacking any human being who criticizes anything he does and exalting himself? He does believe he's the savior, I think it's fair to say. What do you read into this?
So, I mean, one thing I read, and I, appreciate the New York Times for finally being quite explicit about that, is that the president really does not seem to have control over some of his judgment. Because if you look at when this was all happening, it was overnight. He's just rage tweeting or whatever.
He was tweeting or posting until 4:10 a.m.
4:10 in the morning. I mean, that's the sign of someone whose faculties are off. And then, of course, as the New York Times noted, and I think rightfully, we've all been careful of what we're describing, but, these just ramblings, sidebars. I think, first of all, I think the president got confused. I think as they woke up the next day and, everyone is responding about the attack on the Pope, and he's losing a lot of his support, and even, supporters saying it was wrong. He hears the word doctor. Okay, so if you follow, unfortunately, like I do, the press secretary says the photo was, the image was doctored. It makes no sense. I think President Trump heard that as doctor and thought, oh, that's a good excuse. I'm the doctor in the picture. This is not, everyone knows it's a Jesus picture. I mean, come on. So I think it's, I think we have to recognize that Donald Trump does not care about constituency services, if he ever did. He doesn't even care about his base now, because if he did, he would see that the Republicans in the House and Senate are, desperate for a win, desperate to talk about things that Americans want to talk about. It is true, and they don't have that narrative. So what does that mean? It either means that Trump means he's never going away, because he's going to take control of our elections, and there are people who think that. I think there's another theme here, which is Trump can't see past tomorrow now. That's also a sign of his mental capacities. I think it is just burn your way through until you get the next thing to burn. And I think that's what's happening now. He does not care about the party, and the party would have been smart to know that. That's not new to him. And he doesn't care about how he's perceived, because in his mind, he's fine.
Juliette, when you meant, I just want to add, I'm so sorry I didn't ask our colleagues for the sound from this the other day. When you say he doesn't speak to issues that voters actually care about, I think it's hard to disagree with that, even if you're totally trumped up. In one sentence about 3 days ago, when he was asked about what gas prices will be like in November, he started by saying, this is the same sentence, started by saying they'll be basically the same. And then he said, but they probably will be lower, or they could be higher. That was in a 7-second response to a question about gas prices.
So I can't resist pointing out here, though, that all these people part of his base and the right wing and the evangelicals.
All these people what?
They're all upset about the Jesus thing. They weren't upset, all the Jesus people, about cuts to Medicaid or health care or food programs. I mean, it's the meme that gets them all worked up instead of actual policy that's hurting millions of people.
First of all, like Pope Leo, like know your audience. I mean, the guy is, he's untouchable. But you heard J.D. Vance's, who we don't feel sorry for, quote yesterday that the Pope should opine less on theology, which is hilarious. That is
No, okay. You didn't finish what he said. He said the Pope should opine less on theology, and Secretary Hegseth should opine more on theology. I know. It is prayer meetings over at the Department of War.
Right.
We're talking to Juliette. We're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
So, Juliette, there was a very sad story in the Globe about a Chelsea family.
Yes.
They're suing ICE because ICE smashed in their window, and it was very scary when they took the husband out. But this is just an example. The husband did come into the country illegally twice, and he was supposed to be deported. But what happens is, so what he's left behind, a woman who's now going to wind up going on welfare because she's got a very ill child. She's an American citizen. Her kids are born here. It just sort of talks about going after, and the guy's been here for a long time, started a painting business. We're kind of doing this still back end too, even here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, the data is clear right now, just in terms of people saying this is important, deportation. The impact of the massive deportation strategy by the Trump administration has been net negative on unlawful deportation of unlawful immigrants, and net positive on deportation or reduction of lawful immigration.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Basically, the administration is taking people who are out of status but lawful. In other words, they're lawful because they're trying to get in status. This is the low-hanging fruit, and getting them out of the country. Now, the incident that you described, it sounds like he was both, he was unlawful and out of status. He was not trying to get it. But nonetheless, that kind of behavior, the breaking of the windows and stuff like that, that's not effective law enforcement. Presumably the guy was not armed. But that's part of what they're trying to do across the board in terms of what the department's focus is. I don't think we should think that the department has retracted from it. Stephen Miller, who basically runs immigration for the president through the Department of Homeland Security, has gone a little quiet since the killing of 2 Americans, or 3 now we know, over the course of this year. But those raids and those kinds of deportation actions are ongoing throughout the United States. They're doing it with less fanfare than, of course, Secretary Noem did. It'd be hard to do with more fanfare.
Tax day for people that pay, people that are here in the country that came over illegally, do pay taxes. So I think it's estimated $40 billion at least people aren't going to pay because they're afraid of the government coming after them.
I think that's right. I think that's important to note is even because when you say unlawful, that could mean a lot of things, and a lot of these people are just trying to regularize status legally. Right? If you come in asylum, it takes a while, or if you come, and they're too afraid to give their information to the IRS because the IRS is, because of DOJ, the IRS will give information to ICE.
So let me just, I know Marjorie wants to go deeper, and I think you do too, into this brilliant reporting by the New York Times, the title of which is
I almost forgot that.
The View from Inside Trump's DHS. I just want to quote a statistic at the beginning of this exhaustive set of interviews and reporting by the Times. The government's own records, from the government's own records, 5% of people booked in ICE custody in the last year have been convicted of a violent crime, even though the spokesperson in this article for Trump says we're only doing the worst of the worst. 5% violent crime. The number of arrests of people with violent convictions by ICE has increased by 37% under Trump. The number of arrests of those with no convictions of any kind has risen 770%, according to ICE's own data. So this BS about worst of the worst, which people are clinging on to, including the Trump administration itself, is just total malarkey, as Joe Biden would say.
I mean, it is. It was the low-hanging fruit. They'll just pick up anyone off the street. But this is hard. This is data that is always very hard to pierce. And sometimes doesn't get traction, especially amongst Trump's supporters, because they focus on the guy who the unlawful immigrant who raped someone or who killed someone, and that story, it's Willie Horton all over again. That story has much greater magnitude than the statistics that you say. It's an impossible issue for Democrats.
Well, the New York Times did this massive story. It's like 25 pages long about interviewing people at the Department of Homeland Security, people that are actual ICE agents, ICE attorneys, all that kind of stuff. But one of my favorite things, we're almost out of time here, is that apparently, I didn't know this, a former person that used to work for the department says, as Secretary Noem, that would be Kristi Noem, she's a puppy killer, as we all know. At Secretary Noem's first DHS town hall, she came out on stage the theme song "Hot Mama."
I had heard that. This was the first time I saw it reported. I had heard that from people in the room because I still have friends there and stuff, people who are trying to work through this. I literally could not believe it, but that was consistent with how she thought about her reign, which was this provocative, highly sexualized, provocative view of what immigration enforcement was.
And then meanwhile, they talk about Corey Lewandowski, originally from New Hampshire, where he's lived there for certainly a long time. Maybe her boyfriend, we don't really know. But he apparently would troll the halls and see empty desks at the DHS office, check the nameplates, and submit the person who wasn't at their desk for a purge. So it got so bad that the employees, if they were going to the bathroom or down the hall to get cups of coffee, would leave Post-it notes on their desks to tell people they were in the John, basically.
I mean, this is that guy. I mean, that I will say, to show, how even outside the normal, corruption that is ongoing is. Donald Trump has made it clear that corruption can only come from the White House. The agencies are a little bit more difficult because Corey's handing over of multi-million-dollar contracts to friends and family, or friends at least, is being investigated. So Lewandowski is in a heap load of trouble, legal trouble right now.
Yeah.
And if I were the Democrats, if I come in and if I were the Democrats and they come in 2026, the first thing you want to do with the department is to halt all non-compete contracts at all the agencies. It's the non-compete contracts that really are the ones that are just so corrupt. They go to friends of the family.
Yeah, and there's a lot of politicians have gotten into some of these detention centers run by private prisons, and the stories they tell are just really sickening and disgusting. And you wonder where the money's going there to all these private.
But you should read the New York Times thing. Those of you out there.
Do we have time for one more little anecdote from the Times thing? It shows we criticize a lot these ICE agents, but this one guy was talking about how much he didn't like doing what he was supposed to do, and he talks about how he pulled over a guy that they were surveilling, and in the back of the car there's an 8-year-old kid, and the kid is crying, the kid is beside himself, and the father is explaining to the ICE agent, of course in his mask, that the child is autistic and doesn't understand what's going on. And he says the ICE agent says what they wanted him to do is pull the father out and have the cops or somebody come take the kid. But he felt so bad, he said, I couldn't do it. He said he just told the father to go home and get an immigration attorney and get out of here. And so it just showed that some of these ICE agents are very uncomfortable with what they're expected to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, some the CBP guys seem very comfortable, but that's also because that's not their mandate. I mean, it's the weirdest thing in the world is that the most aggressive behavior is being done by people in the interior who are not authorized to be in the interior. ICE agents are trained. And so that's what happens when you unleash one federal law enforcement agency to do something it's not trained to do.
Juliette, good to see you, even long distance.
Juliette.
Be well. We'll see you soon.
Bye, you guys. See you in a few weeks.
Great.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We've been speaking with our national security expert, Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, CNN senior national security analyst. Thank you so much to Juliette.
Before you say what's coming up, I have to make an addendum to an earlier discussion because I'm getting inundated here with something we didn't point out.
What?
Steve from Cambridge called in the first hour and took us to task for not mentioning for example, he said he got a $4,800 tax credit because he depends on tips. So why are we not talking about that? He said not one Democrat voted for it. As a lot of Texans have told me, when the bill came before the Senate in May of 2025, every single senator, including 47 Democrats, voted for it. The vote was 100-0. Not on the big, beautiful bill, but on the the no tax on some tips. Well, don't thank me. Thank listeners.
Thank the texters because I did not know that. I did not know that either. Okay, coming up after this quick break, the next installment of our series, The Long Run, with leaders of 2 local running clubs. Talk about inclusivity in running, one for teenagers, one for those in recovery. I'm Marjorie Egan, Houston Browdy. Listen to BPR 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, we are planting the seed now. Get those calls and texts ready. We've got the executive director for the Wakefield Arboretum standing by to answer all your green thumb gardening questions. Whether it's pruning, prepping, seeding, or sowing, you name it, even if it's not alliterative. We're here to help you make your garden sing this spring on the Curiosity Desk. Today at 1 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Schneider Electric, providing energy technology and sustainability advisory services to help the Boston Athletic Association shape more sustainable events for athletes, fans, and the community. Learn more at se.com.
And Modern Pest Services, providing integrated pest management for Boston homes and businesses. Modern Pest uses a prevention-first approach to seasonal pests to help target the source of the problem. Learn more at modernpest.com.
Welcome back to BPR and 89.7 GBH. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here on Friday with live music, as in Live Music Friday. Tuesday, April 28th. It's a twofer. The first hour, Governor Healy will be with us for the whole hour at the library. Second hour, Mayor Wu will be with us for the whole hour. Obviously, ask the governor, ask the mayor. Time for another installment of our limited series, The Long Run, about running and how to make it more sustainable for future generations, environmentally and otherwise. Today we're exploring how to make running something like a marathon more inclusive. Joined now live at the library by 2 people working to do just that. Anna McEwen is from Dreamfar, dreamfarhsm.org. And Jim Kane is of Boston Bulldogs Run Club. That's bostonbulldogsrunning.org. Anna and Jim, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in. So let's start with you, Anna. What is Dreamfar about?
Sure. Dreamfar is a nonprofit running and mentorship organization. We're based in Newton, and our goals and our mission are to provide mentorship and running in an accessible way for teenagers across 6 communities, and we do it mostly for free.
So what does that mean?
Why? What's the goal?
The goal is to reduce as many barriers to wellness as possible for high school students who aren't traditionally served by interscholastic sports and extracurricular activities.
So what does it mean, Anna, that a bunch of kids get together and just go out? They're not on the track team, they're not on the cross country, they're just going to go out and run as a group kind of deal?
You'd think it would be that organic, but no, there's a little organization behind it. So each school site that we partner with has school site mentors, and they are the program delivery agents. They ensure that kids are showing up. They make sure that they are feeling good. They talk about all of these holistic pieces of the puzzle that make running just one part of wellness, and help them to identify the goals that they're seeking to achieve over a roughly 27-week process.
Great.
So this is our last week of the season, and we have 49 high school students who are going to run a half marathon or marathon in Newport, Rhode Island on Saturday.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Jim, what's the deal with Boston Bulldogs? Who's the constituency you're working with?
So we're a running and wellness organization for individuals in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, as well as their families, friends, and allies.
And to what end there as well? What does that do for those souls who decide to participate?
Well, we think that everyone should run, and we think that everyone should be in community, but especially if you're in recovery from drug or alcohol addiction. We run several runs a week, 6 weekly runs in Chestnut Hill, Quincy, Plymouth, Worcester, and a weekly trail run in Needham.
How long has that been around, Boston Bulldogs?
11 years.
And how long has Dreamfar been around?
This is our 18th consecutive season.
So do you, starting with you, Anna, do you look back and see what the outcomes have been for some of the people who decided to participate in this effort?
Yeah, we actually, I'm relatively new to Dreamfar. I've only been with the organization for 4 years as a mentor, program director, executive director. But going back and looking at some of the older data, it tells us that kids keep running well after they leave Dreamfar, that they feel better about themselves, they feel better about their peer groups, they feel better about connecting with adults that they may not be traditionally connected to. So it's like that third party person that we call a trusted adult in our community.
So
and
it's
that's a really
like a third
important
space
piece.
thing. We talk about third spaces a lot on the show. It's essentially, this is it's a third space for people, right?
Every Saturday, everyone meets, the mentors and the mentees, and we get together and we talk about what we're doing, and we look at how far we've come and how we may need to adjust our sails so that we can reframe what our goals are and maybe pursue them in a way that is different from when we initially came up with that goal.
Well, there's also the social aspect too. Obviously, you're going to make friends with these people that you're running with, and that's another social.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that Jim and I overlap with is like for a lot of the people that we serve, they're seeking connection and they're not finding it elsewhere. And this is a place where they can come to be themselves, their authentic selves, no matter what that is. And we're going to meet them where they're at. And whatever their goal is, we're going to help them try to achieve it in some way.
So can you look back, have you looked back in the same way that Anna's organization has to see what people in recovery, those dealing with addiction, what this program is, what Boston Bulldogs has done for them?
Sure, it's a recovery tool. It's not just high fives and T-shirts, right? It's over long periods of time, now 11 years, our members are finding like this is what sustains them. Now, some are amateur runners, some are long-distance runners. We're going to have 30 run the Boston Marathon on Monday, 15 or 17 as part of our charity team. But running, it also adds to this other thing of community. Community, that's really where we connect. Community, it's fraying everywhere. No one's going to church. No one's doing bowling leagues. No one's doing, the Elks Club.
You know, we have our cottage industry here on the show is we badmouth the legislature. That's essentially what we do.
That's what we do.
But you correct me if I'm wrong. Hasn't Boston Bulldogs received a grant of some sort, or is it Dream? I know, yeah, you have, right?
Yes, we received a Massachusetts state.
To what end? What are they funding?
Just to help us with our operating costs. And so not only do we run these weekly runs, right? We do a Junior Bulldogs program for at-risk kids in the city. We do outreach. Last year we did 121. Activities in soup kitchens, shelters, prisons, hospitals.
So you actually go there and people run from there. Like you might go to a sober living house and people would come out and run, or is it different?
It's different. We share the good news about the Boston Bulldogs.
Okay.
We share the news about our recovery program and running. And we say to them, you know, if you're serious, if you want to recover, join the Bulldogs.
Well, you know, I think this is such a big deal because the wonderful thing about running is you can be totally uncoordinated. All you need to be able to do is put one foot in front of another and get a pair of shoes. So, and then for your health, it just, I think, especially if you are in recovery, if you go out and run 5 miles, it's a disincentive to do bad things when you get back from the run.
Exactly. Running's a lot like walking. It's just a little faster.
That's right.
Right? But it also becomes a kind of like a lint for all their wellness practices, right? So I did that run. It clears my mental sky. I focus on my diet. I focus on how I sleep, not having the phone near me all the time. Other things like that.
But yeah, the thing that impresses me most about what you're both doing and other similar organizations with just different constituents is the community aspect you talk about. It's sort of like when we talked about Putnam a few months ago, bowling alone, and how obviously the goal is people bowl together or run together. And clearly creating a sense of community in people who feel that there isn't one is huge. I mean, that's pretty central, right?
Yeah, I think when I look at the student mentees that we serve and have served for the past several years, they are an incredibly diverse subset of all of these communities that I think people would traditionally look at and say, it's a wealthy suburban community that we serve. But in every community, there are pockets of people who need more. And our job is to pivot and say, where is that need and how do we meet it today? Because kids in 2026 aren't the same as they were in 2019, and they have different needs and they have different expectations. And one of the themes that I try to always have in the back of my head when I talk to a young person is these kids are up against insurmountable odds for everything. They expect perfection. If you come to Dreamfar and you just show up and you do it for yourself and you put in the effort, you can't fail here, and you will probably exceed your wildest dreams.
Great. By the way, if a kid or someone dealing with recovery wants to get more information and maybe participate, I assume the websites Marjorie's going to give would allow them an entry point. Yes?
Yes, and for us, the Bulldogs, you just show up.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty great.
And you've got a lot of events coming up in May, Jim. You got something going on at Franklin Park?
Yes, it's our Run for Recovery, our 11th annual Run for Recovery. It's on Sunday, May 17th at Franklin Park. We'd love your listeners to come. We go to our website, create a team, and come out. We'll have about 600, maybe 700 runners and walkers.
And walkers, too.
Yeah, please.
There's an opportunity, Jim, for those who don't run anymore but would like to walk. Okay.
So you run in Newport with the kids?
I'm actually running Boston with a young woman from Wellesley who's fundraised for the Joseph Tierney Center in South Boston. She's raised $13,000, which
Good
is
for
amazing.
her.
It's her first marathon ever, and it was her dream last year that this was what she wanted to accomplish before she graduated from high school. So, you know, that's my job, is if you have a dream, let's make it real.
You look like you've run about 20 marathons.
This will be my 20th.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Talk about a good guess.
That was pretty dead on.
Okay, so what's the deal? Are you going to run together? And I suppose
Yeah.
somebody gets tired or gets a cramp. You have to stick together?
My job is to run step for step with every
Very
student
good.
I've started the Boston Marathon with. And I've actually run with Jim's niece and nephew, 2 separate occasions, raising money for 2 different organizations.
Oh, wow.
Nephew meaning Ronan?
Yes.
That was the last thing I was going to say. By the way, this is not why Jim is here.
Oh, no.
It turns out he is the uncle of our spectacular intern, Ronan. What do you think of him?
He's outstanding.
He is?
Oh, God.
Raise your right hand when you say
Absolutely.
that. He is outstanding?
You know, yesterday we had his parents here checking up on him to make sure
The whole
he was going
family's
well.
obviously checking us out. What you both do is great. We're thrilled to learn more about it. Good luck with your work, and thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Anna McEwen, Executive Director of Dreamfar, and the website dreamfarhsm.org. That's dreamfarhsm.org. And Jim Keane, Ronan's uncle, he's from Boston Bulldogs Run Club, and that is bostonbulldogsrunning.org. bostonbulldogsrunning.org. Thank you again for coming in. Good luck in the race. Coming up after this quick break, because it is the long run. The long run. That's the little series we're doing here, and long run is made possible by Schneider Electric, and we thank very much Schneider Electric. Okay, coming up after this quick break, we're going to open the lines on this one Boston day. This is marking 13 years since the Boston Marathon bombings. Today has become a day of service for Bostonians. Are you doing anything special, kind to mark the day? I'm Margie Regan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
More than half the grades given out at Harvard are A's. To students, these are all well-earned.
It's a farce to say that there's nothing distinguishing Harvard students just because we all have A's.
To faculty, the standard waters down the achievement that A's should represent.
I can give an A- and almost inevitably face a bitching, whining, complaining, entitled student in my office. Or I can give an A and not have to bother, and I can get back to my work.
I'm Kurt Carapezza. You can find the rest of that story online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Revision Energy, a renewable energy company building and servicing solar, batteries, and air source heat pumps for local homes and businesses for over 20 years. Revision Energy. Revision your power. More at revisionenergy.com.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, and former NASA head Charles Bolden. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR 89.7 GBH. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Today at 2:49 p.m., the bells at the Old South Church will ring in memory of those affected by the marathon bombing. The first explosion went off, I'm sure you know, 13 years ago today at 2:49. City is established today as One Boston Day. That's why Mayor Wu and Maura Healey were here earlier in the day with lots of people who suffered an unimaginable loss on that day. And in the decade plus since bombing, it's become a day for remembrance, community resilience, and acts of kindness or service. And we figure we spend the last few minutes of the day asking how you, if you are marking either today, One Boston Day, or beyond One Boston Day, what you're doing to volunteer, to provide service. And before Marjorie criticized me, it's true, my view of service is often allowing someone to cut in when I'm at the Alston-Brighton exit on the turnpike. I'm not an exemplar of this.
Well, neither
but I know
am I.
a lot of people do incredible things, and I think this One Boston Day thing, which obviously started under Mayor Menino, we saw Dot Joyce here this morning too, is a really important thing for the city. And again, if you can't do service or volunteering today in the memory of those who lost their lives or suffered great losses, like Jess Kensky and Patrick Downs, who were with us the other day.
They'll be with us again on Monday.
What? We're going to replay it on Monday, right, for Marathon Day. What are you doing? And it's okay, you can brag. We usually make fun of people who brag about things they're doing. It's fine today in our remaining moments to talk, because it may be a model for other people like me and Marjorie to do the right thing.
Well, there is a model.
What is it?
Apparently you can also take time for self-care today, Jim.
You can?
Yeah.
I'm not doing that either.
So you can do that.
301-8970 is the number. You know, despite all the ridiculing you do of me, there is, I mean, we talked about mandatory service a couple of months ago with Doris Kearns Goodwin and her son, and Alan Casey, obviously, who believes on a variation on a theme. But the whole notion of service, the value is not just to the service recipient, but it really, even the likes of me, you feel so much better and fuller when you've done something, even if it's small, good for other people, you know?
Well, there's a bunch of things the City of Boston is doing, and there is this neighborhood cleanup. I think they do that every year at Franklin Park, the playground there on April 18th. It starts at 9 o'clock. You can go to that. They talk about other things so that you can do on a less formal basis, check in on an elderly neighbor, surprise a friend with a cup of coffee, do the self-care kind of deal, or you can also donate money. You know, Anna McEwen was just
McEwen,
talking
yeah.
about the $13,000 that the teenager had raised that she's running the marathon with. A lot of people donate, I should say, to Boston Marathon runners. I think you have to donate at least $10,000 to run. That's a lot of money raised.
Charity groups,
Yeah, it'd be the charity group.
Don't have to meet the time.
No, there's a lot of runners who don't meet the time, but they're running for charities. 13 years. Can't believe it's been 13 years.
In any case, 877-301-8897. An opportunity to talk about the kind of service you provide today or on other days that might be an inspiration for other people who are not doing as much, but probably would like to, if they could get a little nudge from the likes of you.
You know, Sarah from West Roxbury is texting about our last segment, which is talking about Dreamfar, the teenagers that get together and run. And she says, I'm a long-distance runner now in adulthood, but when I was a teen, there really weren't opportunities to participate in sports for people like me who weren't athletically gifted enough to compete. Fitness should be for everyone. And that's what, like I said before, that's one of the great things about running. You don't have to be coordinated at all, and you can go out there and run.
Well, can I take it one step further? I've said this to you before. The first marathon I ran when I lived in New York City, what occurred to me only at the starting line, is there any other athletic event in the world where an average person with average skills can run? Alberto Salazar was the lead runner and the world record holder, and he was in the same race as I and my friends were.
I know.
And so it's that kind of thing, too, which is really, really great.
And I think that the thing about clearing your head and making it easier to be healthy and all those things. I mean, I think running, I can't run anymore, but I used to love it when I could. 877-301-8970. You're
Does this
doing
mean none
something.
of our audience provides any service to their fellow human beings? Is that what this lack of response
I'm
would
looking
suggest?
for texts. We haven't gotten it yet, so maybe no one.
Maybe they're out providing service to their fellow human beings or neighbors or that sort of thing.
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. But I think a lot of people do these kinds of things. This isn't really, it's not today, but I remember when this happened, I was telling this to Darius, one of our security guards here this morning. I was still working for the Herald then. And, you know, they turned off all the cell phone service when the marathon bombing happened, and you couldn't get it any further. I think they stopped you at maybe Gloucester or Hereford or something like that. So all these runners at that point, they'd run like 25 miles, right? And a lot.
Like 26 miles.
Yeah, they were close to the end of the race, and they were all stopped there by the police because of the bombing. And they were in just their little running outfits, and they're sweating. And it was an incredible thing to see. And they were confused. We didn't know yet what had happened, and your cell phone wouldn't work. All these people on Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue came out of their apartments, and they brought people blankets, and they brought people food, and they brought people sweaters, and people gave away their sweaters and gave away their coats because it was, I don't remember the temperature, but it wasn't like 80 degrees. It was chilly enough that you'd be cold. I remember that was a very moving thing to see. People just
Why do you say it doesn't fit? It's providing for a need of a fellow human being.
Yeah, it just was something I'll always remember from that day is people coming out of their house to help the people that were running in the race.
Let's take some calls. Jen in New Hampshire, you're first. Yes, you are. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
We're good. Thank you for calling.
So I just wanted to say that I've been involved in volunteerism for a while, and somebody on the PTA once told me that there are three things you can offer something. It's time, talent, or treasure.
That's a good one.
And so if you don't feel that obviously not everybody has the means to donate money, and they can't. Not everybody has the time to donate something, but they have the money. Or if you have a specific set of skills that you can do something, but not necessarily like hand out food at a soup kitchen or do something like that, then you donate your treasure or your talent.
Why do you do it, Jen? What does it do for you? Or is that part of the motivation? What is the motivation?
I'm a humanist, and I feel like the only way to get through this life is to do things that you hope would come back around, that somebody would do for you if you were in need. It's kind of to be human. That's what it's about.
That was a beautiful call from beginning to end, Jen. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us. We appreciate it.
Linda from Natick says Jewish family members in Framingham, Family Services in Framingham has a program where you volunteer to drive elderly people to medical appointments. You actually go into the appointment with them and take notes. I've only done it a couple of times a month, but it's very rewarding, she says. And then someone else is suggesting that you donate a pint of blood. It won't cost you anything but an hour of your time. And an anonymous person from Newton says that they're donating to Martin Richards Foundation, always an inspiration. And people probably remember Martin Richard was the little boy who was killed on the marathon day. I believe he was 8 years old when he was killed.
His parents were here today for the wreath laying.
His parents and his parents are, the whole family is a wonderful family. The mother was injured, the father was injured, the daughter had, I think she may have lost a leg. Yeah, but I do remember when they were debating the death penalty for the Tsarnaevs, that the Martin Richards' father wrote an op-ed in the Globe saying he didn't want that to happen. He wanted him to stay in jail forever.
Well, he's also done wonderful things in memory of Martin. I mean,
the playground.
The playground. I mean,
the playground. They're just a wonderful, wonderful family. Kind of lift your spirits.
877-301-8970. We're asking you on this special day following the wreath laying at the finish line at 10 a.m. this morning. What are you doing to serve your fellow human beings? Marjorie, another Marjorie in Needham. Hey there.
Hi, I have three things.
Please.
An easy thing to do is go into your cupboard or pick up a couple of extra things at the grocery store, bring it to your food pantry. Every place has a food pantry. Second of all, a shout out to my daughter-in-law, Emily, who has raised over $250,000 for Dana-Farber.
Oh my
God.
Wow.
And will be honored this Jubilee, at the marathon. And my two granddaughters, for their bat mitzvah, are collecting feminine products for their local food pantry because women are always, many times, overlooked.
That's a great
Those
family,
are great.
Marjorie.
Those are great.
I do. How proud am I?
I can tell in your voice. How has she raised $250,000 for Dana-Farber?
She's run for like 18 years. Wow. So what she does, she has to, as you just said, she has to raise $10,000 anyway. And every year she has a fundraiser in Needham with friends and family and citizens, and they have an auction, and people just have a good time. And she's relentless. She's tireless. Her name is Emily.
Emily, the best part of your call is what you said, the pride in your voice of your family. It's pretty great. Marjorie, thanks for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it.
Makes you feel like a little bit of a deadbeat, doesn't it?
Well, yes. Well, here's an anonymous texter. How about donating a pint of blood, as you mentioned? Won't cost you anything but an hour of your time. Do you ever do that?
Donate a pile.
I've
not
done it
for
like twice
long.
in my whole life.
I used to do
How
it at
pathetic
the
is
Herald.
that, by
I know.
the
They
way?
used to come to the Herald and do it right there in the building.
I think they came to GBH. They may still come to
Yeah.
GBH. Now, if I may be modestly self-critical, what possible excuse do we not have for at least donating blood on a regular basis, even if you don't do much else?
We're just disgraceful, Jim. There's
serious.
There's no question about. Oh, you can donate blood at WGBH on April 21st. Jim's called out sick that day. Is that one of the days?
Really, that is not helpful because people are going to repeat that. Now, here's what we're going to do. This is a small thing. Even though we're at the library this day, can you check before the end of the show if we can do it after 1:30? Marjorie and I are going to drive back and do one incredibly small thing.
We are?
To show we're not as useless as we appear if it's still open at 1:30 when our show is done here, okay?
Oh, here's someone
Marjorie's not saying anything. I don't think that's very
I was reading the text.
21st.
The 21st,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Apropos of your last segment about running, I'm in recovery and regularly reach out to others who are new to sobriety. Saving the world is overwhelming. Finding your niche and where your service is needed. Awful personal pain and challenges can translate into help for others. That's from Rebecca in Florida. And Mike in North Carolina, he volunteers at the local food bank, picks up groceries, donates to area grocery stores, and brings them to the shelter. Food is used to feed the hungry and homeless.
You know, and it's that woman who's, I'm sorry, I forgot her name for 1 second, said time, treasure, or talent.
Yeah.
You really, if you don't have any money and you don't have a particular skill that's of value, is everybody has at least some amount of time to do something. And we have we clearly have to.
Listen to this. 4 years ago, I went back to school to study to become an American Sign Language interpreter. And now I donate my time with deaf and blind communication across this network, something called DBCAN. It has fulfilled my life in ways I can't even explain. I'm a recovered addict, 10 years sober. Sober was a performer my whole life, and now I've helped the deaf and blind and those people who cannot even hear me sing. This person who is or was a singer. Wow, that's pretty expensive. There's a lot of people are telling us about their blood drives, Jim. There's going to be a lot of options to go for a blood drive.
No, well, I either have good or bad news for you, Marjorie. Mm-hmm. They're there till 3 o'clock on April 21st, which is plenty of time for us to get back. Okay. And there's still appointments available on that day. Are we doing it or
we'll have to do it now.
We
have
can
to do
lie
it now.
next to each
Usually
other.
you get a little juice and a little cookie
You do?
after you donate the blood. Yeah, to restore your.
If you get free food, why have I not done this in the past?
You do get free food. That has been my experience anyway.
Thanks for what all of you are doing, particularly on this day.
Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. We are done. Thanks to everybody who came down to the Boston Public Library to see the show here.
Thank you
and
all.
Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by political commentator Chuck Todd, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety Andrew Cabral. And as energy prices skyrocket for everybody, we're going to talk with two experts to explain the line items driving high energy bills and why attempts to cut mass save won't save consumers money. We're also going to get an arts and culture update from GBH's Jared Bowen. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, additional support from Ronan Keene, we had the parents yesterday, we had the uncle today. Tomorrow we're having the cousins and the second cousins. They're all going to come in.
I think he has siblings too, by the
siblings.
way. We got to get them all in.
All in, absolutely.
Done.
Maybe they all have red hair. Think so? Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Juan Jose Cadena, our host at the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Curiosity Desk with Edgar B. Hurt III starts right after us here on 89.7 GBH, and Jared Bowen and the Culture Show start at 2 o'clock. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in today.
Thank you all. Appreciate
Hope you can tune in tomorrow and have your celebrate One Boston Day today. We're all supposed to do that by giving back.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's, how-tos, and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And M&M Skylights, offering the full range of Velux Skylight products, installation, and maintenance services to customers from Boston to Portland and surrounding areas. More information at mmskylights.com.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping customers achieve their vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding them from design to completion. With showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III, today on the Curiosity Desk. To all the dawdlers, do-it-laters, and chief procrastinators out there, we at the Curiosity Desk would like to formally wish you a happy tax day. We'll talk with one tax expert about how filing your taxes became such a chore and why, in her view, the companies helping simplify tax filings have made the process, well, less simple.
The more confusing and complex that product is, the more the people who provide it can charge for it.
Then, as the world turns its attention to oil, we're also facing a shortage of helium. Why that's bad news for more than just Big Balloon. Plus, get those calls and texts ready. We've got a gardening expert ready to talk pruning, planting, and more. All ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Iran's military warns it will retaliate by blocking other important shipping routes if the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz continues. U.S. warships and aircraft started enforcing the strait Monday in an effort to prevent any Iranian oil or cargo from passing the waterway. NPR's Jackie Northam reports.
Major General Ali Abdullahi, the commander of Iran's top military command center, threatened to halt all trade in the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Red Sea. Of particular concern is the Bab el-Mandeb, a narrow waterway in the Red Sea for vessels sailing between Europe and Asia. Iranian-aligned Houthi militias in Yemen control much of the coastline near the Bab el-Mandeb and severely disrupted shipping during the height of the Gaza war. Saudi Arabia started diverting crude oil from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea by pipeline just after the Iran war began in late February. That route could be in jeopardy if Iran retaliates. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
The International Monetary Fund is warning that the war in Iran could lead to a global recession. The IMF says as oil and gas prices continue to rise, it could be a close call. Speaking on Fox News, President Trump acknowledged that risk.
There's a hit because, we go through it for whatever it is, 6 weeks. There's going to be a hit, but it's going to recover, I think, fully. Somehow they misquoted me. I think oil will be down to the levels it was. They said, I expect oil to be high at the midterms. I don't expect that. I think that we will be somewhere around where we were, maybe even lower. When this is over, I think the stock market is going to boom.
The president's comments come as peace talks between the U.S. and Iran are expected to restart this week. Vice President J.D. Vance says the Pope should, quote, be careful when he talks about theology. NPR's Sarah Ventry reports this follows a tense back and forth between Pope Leo and President Trump in recent days.
Speaking at a Turning Point USA event at the University of Georgia this week, Vance, who converted to Catholicism in 2019, downplayed the tensions between Washington and the Vatican and implied some of the Pope's comments about the Catholic faith are inaccurate.
I think one of the issues here is that if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant.
These comments come after Trump recently posted on social media that Leo is, quote, weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Trump also posted an AI-generated image of himself depicted as Jesus, which has since been deleted. Sarah Ventry, NPR News.
This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Today is One Boston Day, commemorating the victims, survivors, and first responders from the Boston Marathon bombings. The attacks happened on this day, April 15, back in 2013. Victims' families gathered alongside Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, and other local leaders for a wreath-laying ceremony at the site of the bombings on Boylston Street earlier today. Resident Elena Castellini was there, and she's running in her first Boston Marathon this year and says it's important to remember what happened.
I think during the race, I want to think of that too and acknowledge what happened and also hold these people in my mind and my heart while I'm running because it is also for them.
One Boston Day also serves as a celebration of the city's resilience, with residents encouraged to perform acts of kindness and community service. The summer-like weather we've been having is about to bring with it the chance of severe thunderstorms for the second straight day across Massachusetts. After a line of downpours and strong winds moved through northern part of the state last night, National Weather Service says it'll be areas south of the Mass Pike that will most likely see storms today. Thunderstorms and damaging winds are likely to move into Connecticut, Rhode Island, and southern Massachusetts between 6 and 10 p.m. If so, do watch for down tree lines and down power lines. Red Sox wrap up their series with the Twins this afternoon. It's a 1:40 start. The Fleet hosts Minnesota tonight at 7. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include United States Postal Service, dedicated to putting reliability at the core of USPS Ground Advantage to help businesses operate smoothly. More at USPS.com/groundadvantage.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. It is every American's favorite holiday, Tax Day. In the lead up to the 15th, Americans have been preparing their own tax filings or seeking professional help in one way or another. But this annual spring ritual is not a worldwide practice. Our question, why is it that we do things the way we do here in America? And could we ever create a system that works as seamlessly as we see in other places abroad? We are joined now in studio by Beverly Moran. She's a Powless Endowment Senior Tax Fellow at Boston College. Beverly, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you for having me.
So as we said, it's tax day, which means for many, especially the procrastinators among us, it's time for the onset of, at the very least, some low-grade panicking, maybe some scrambling for forms where you know you put them over there a couple of weeks or months ago and you got them, but they're not there now. What happened? Who or what is it that makes this so seemingly complicated? Is it something inherent in our system, or is this somehow a lesson that we are collectively refusing to learn year after year?
Well, unfortunately, it's not that taxes are complicated. For most people, taxes are not complicated. And in other countries, particularly in Western Europe, the same people with the same sort of jobs and the same sort of income don't do any of the things we do. They get a letter that tells them what they owe, and they can challenge it or not. But here we have a great deal of complexity around the issue of filing because complexity drives profits.
You know, for many, many people who receive regular paychecks, we've been paying our taxes all along the way. It's been coming out of our paychecks. And, you know, why then do we end up filing this return when essentially the government already has the money? Presumably, in most cases, they know what we owed and whether what we paid out is what we should have paid out. Why do we do it like this?
Well, your description is exactly correct. The problem is that over time, what has happened is that tax filing, rather than being a public duty, has become a type of consumer product. And the more confusing and complex that product is, the more the people who provide it can charge for it.
So, Beverly, we've just gone back to the moon. We hear the promises being made that AI, you know, for good and bad, AI is coming for all of us. It's going to take over 3/4 of the white-collar jobs. I mean, and this sort of thing, even if it is complicated, the tax filing system seems exactly the kind of thing AI should be able to just do for us if it's ready to come for our jobs. What, if anything, is stopping us from making this all simpler?
Well, first of all, I think we need to face that in countries across the world that we consider to be equivalent to our country, people do not do this. They do not have this problem. And they have not had this problem long before anybody heard anything about AI. Whether AI comes into the system later or not, it's not necessary. Many other countries handle this without AI and completely within the government. What's happened in the United States is that from the beginning of this century on, Congress and the Senate have tried to push for a free filing system on the IRS website, but the paid tax preparation industry, the large companies, not the small people on the corner, have constantly put roadblocks to that happening.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're speaking with Senior Tax Fellow Beverly Moran about why and how our tax system has become, or at least seems to be, so convoluted. Let's talk a little bit more about the free file tax program. Can you you said sort of from the beginning of the century, can you give us a little bit of background on this IRS free file tax program, which is something, by the by, I'm not 100% sure everybody even knows exists?
Well, it doesn't really exist at the moment. So what happened is this. At the beginning of the century, the IRS was told to set up a free filing program on its website. What the IRS did was it entered into private contracts with large tax preparation companies in which it promised to not compete with those companies and to feed taxpayers to those companies on their website.
I see. So, so just to clarify, what they decided to do to meet this mandate of a free file system is say, rather than build our own system of software here on the IRS website, we've got these large companies, they already have software, we're going to work with them, and when people come to this free file site on the IRS, we're going to send them along to one of these folks and say, hey, there's a free service that they provide.
Exactly. Then what happened was that the IRS didn't do the oversight that it should have done. Now, this is not my evaluation. This comes from the Inspector General of the Treasury, the Inspector General for Administration. And so in this period where there was no oversight, what these companies did was they created algorithms in their websites that moved people away from free filing and into paid filing. So that in the end, 97% of the people who showed up at that website were tracked into paid filing.
And of those people, I mean, I don't need an exact number, but if 97% of them sort of, as you say, they go into the system thinking, all right, I'm going to do a free service, and somewhere along the way, they get upsold on something that ends up charging them.
Yes.
Now, I would imagine in some of these cases, it, in theory, might make sense for that person, depending on how complicated their financial situation is, or not.
Well, according to the IRS and the Inspector General and the Senate and the Congress who did hearings on this, there are over 100 million taxpayers who are eligible for free filing. Now, not all 100 million showed up on the IRS website.
Sure.
But we're just talking about those 100 million who it shouldn't make any sense for them to pay for their taxes. They were already identified as people who
so they
don't
meet
have
the
taxes.
qualifications in terms of what their income is. They have a simple enough situation that they should not have to pay for it, and yet they're ending up paying for it.
Exactly, and they're ending up paying for it because they're being streamed into the for-pay system.
So you mentioned just before, I sort of asked you about, the IRS free service on the website, and you kind of said, "Wow, it doesn't really exist anymore." What has changed from that early arrangement? Even if it was imperfect, it sounds like it's changed.
Well, the first change was that after these investigations came out, Intuit and H&R Block left the system, although they continued to offer free filing on their private websites. They offered it on paper, but in practice, they were still steering people away from it. And that was confirmed by the New York State Attorney General that entered into a $141 million settlement with Intuit. And there are other states that are also looking into this. So then what happened was that the Biden administration decided that they were going to move to exactly the system that you described, where the IRS would create the software and they
built their own.
They built their own. And the first year, 140,000 people used the system because they did it as just for a few states to see if it worked.
So a pilot program, so to speak.
Pilot program, absolutely. And then in the next year, it was set to expand to several more states, about twice as many states. And that worked as well. And then the Trump administration came in and closed that down. So we're back to the old system without Intuit and without H&R Block.
Now, Intuit and H&R Block, do still offer free filings. Is that not the case?
They say they offer free filings. They're free filings on paper, but it seems as though the vast majority of people, as the Inspector General found, 97% end up being moved into pay returns.
Interesting. So what would your message be? Presumably, what was the number you threw out earlier? It was something like how many people qualify for
over
a free
100
filing?
million.
So over 100 million people. So that's like a third of the population of the United States, or almost a third of the population of the United States, ought to be qualifying for a free filing. So what should people? What do you recommend a person do? What qualifies them for a free filing, and how can they execute on that? Is there a path around these larger companies, like you point out, like Intuit or H&R Block, or can you be particularly vigilant on these sites? Make sure you've gone into the free system piece and stayed in the free system piece, and don't take an upgrade.
Well, you can try, but it is actually very difficult. I've tried it on sites myself just to see how it works. And part of the problem is that when you go to the IRS website, each one of the providers will tell you what makes you eligible for their program. But if you just go by what makes you eligible for their program, what you might find in the end is that you're still not eligible for the program. So, for example, I set up a return just as a dummy to see, and I followed all the instructions, and in the end I was charged. And so I called and I said, well, this is supposed to be free. Why am I being charged? And they said, well, because you were eligible for an earned income tax credit, and if there are any credits involved, then we're not going to give you the free filing. But the point is that the description that they had of who was eligible, anybody who met that description would be eligible for an earned income tax credit.
So if you were eligible for the beginning of the system, you were going to come up and be eligible for an earned tax income credit, which means there was no way through.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure how many people even understand what it is to be eligible for an earned tax income credit.
Right. And they didn't make it clear, right? They didn't say, here are the things that you need, plus no earned income tax credit.
Right.
And now there was a government investigation that found that H&R Block trained its people to not tell people how to get to the free site, and that Intuit actually hid its free site so that you couldn't pull it up if you went online and and
hard
did
to
a
find.
search.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's anything as American as paying taxes, it is making a sale and upselling, right? So what would you recommend, Beverly? What would you recommend that a person do? I mean, is the answer to do a paper filing, which you still can do, even though it sounds like less than 7% of people do paper filings? So what is the recommendation if so many people actually theoretically qualify to be able to file for free? What can they do to actually file for free?
Well, there are a couple of different things they can do. AARP has a program that's free. They'll file for you. There's something called TIPS that's often in law schools and accounting schools in your area. That's also free. You might have free filing in your churches. They're staying away from the large companies and trying to find help with nonprofits is really the way to go.
All right. We've been speaking with Beverly Moran, Paulus Endowment Senior Tax Fellow at Boston College, about why the free and pre-populated tax returns are not widely used in the U.S., and how we do things here and how we might do them differently. Beverly, thank you so much for your time. I got to go because I got to do my taxes. After a quick break, there's a lot of focus right now on the U.S.'s supply of oil in the Strait of Hormuz. But it's not just oil sitting in ships there and affected by the war. It's also impacting our supply of helium. What's happening and why this means more to you than just your 7-year-old's birthday party. That's next. You're listening to The Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. Don't go away.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Sharks Come Cruisin drops anchor at our Boston Public Library studio for live music. The Providence Band has built its sound around sea shanties, maritime songs, and the kind of communal energy that demands a sing-along. Plus, this year marks 100 years since Robert Goddard launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in Auburn, Massachusetts. And Museum of Worcester is marking the space age centennial with a new show. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Vivo Performing Arts, presenting the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, returning to Boston for its annual engagement at the Bach Center Wang Theater, April 30th through May 3rd. Tickets at vivoperformingarts.org.
You're listening to The Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. By the way, we are back at the Boston Public Library live this Friday, so I hope you can join us there. As for right now, you might want to hoard those Mylar balloons because we are running out of helium again. If a helium shortage sounds a little familiar, that's because it is. It's been a persistent problem that seems to be popping up every few years. The most recent cause, damage to key infrastructure in Qatar, stemming from the ongoing war in Iran, as well as the blockade of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Qatar, if you don't know, holds about roughly 1/3 of the world's supply of helium. So naturally, seeing these headlines, we had some questions. If helium is the most abundant element or one of the most abundant elements in the entire universe, how do we keep running out of it? What does it mean for energy, technology, children's birthday parties? And what, if anything, can we do about it? Here now to help us answer some of those questions and more, we're joined by Linda Dorrera, professor of chemistry at Boston University. Linda, thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with, just kind of asking why we should care about this. I mean, other than having to maybe blow up my own balloons at my kid's birthday party, or maybe I miss, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade if we don't have helium, why does it really matter?
So since we've had access to helium in the early 20th century, we've found all kinds of uses for it. So it's incredibly inert, and almost all of its uses rely on that fact. It just doesn't do
anything.
So that's by inert, you mean it's like it's not going to set on fire, it's not going to blow up. This is what you mean by inert.
That's and even more than that, it just doesn't even do gentle things, right? So
It's a lazy element.
It is the quintessential lazy element. That's right. So it is the second most abundant element in the universe, as you alluded to, and it is the most inert element that we know of, right? So it was really only, I think, after 2015 when anybody induced helium to be part of any kind of molecular compound with any other element.
So what are some of the uses that we found for it besides, obviously, balloons?
So because it's inert, and it's a gas, it's a really good way to chase out everything else. So if you imagine blowing air through a tube, that would chase out whatever's in there, but it might leave a little bit of moisture or some of the other components of air, nitrogen or oxygen or CO2. And depending on what you're doing, those are bad things to have. So, for example, the semiconductor industry is very, very fussy about what elements get into any part of all of the chips in all of our computer devices. So when you're manufacturing those, you want to sort of clean out all the pipes, and helium is used extensively in that type of environment. Another example, a bit more dangerous, is if you're setting up a rocket, like maybe you have the Artemis missions.
Maybe you want to go to the moon, for
maybe,
example.
Well, or maybe you even just want to test it. So your rocket fuel needs to be just rocket fuel and not have anything else in there, right? So we saw the tragedy of the Challenger when there was a leak and something didn't go as planned. So helium is used to make sure that the rocket fuel containers have rocket fuel in them and nothing else, and they have to stay very cold. So that's one of the other special aspects of helium, is it helps us keep things very, very cold when they need to be.
Why?
So if you want to keep something cold, you have to take away the heat, and it helps to have a liquid to do that. But if you get really, really cold, so relative to absolute zero, let's say 4 Kelvin, almost everything is frozen at 4 Kelvin. But helium is liquid, so it can still move and take some heat away with it if you were shuffling it around, right? We're all familiar with some liquid, maybe in a gas-powered automobile, that helps to keep the engine cool. So the liquid's got to move to do that.
So when we think about how do we get helium, which is to say, I think we know if I put helium in a balloon, the helium is lighter than the air around it and it floats up, right?
That's correct, yes.
So how do we get it on Earth if it's so light that it wants to float up off the Earth? It seems to me that it must be kind of difficult to actually capture. Does it have to be trapped somewhere? And then if it's trapped, how do you get it without it just floating away?
That's right. Great question. So it starts out trapped. So it's generated through natural radioactivity processes on the Earth all the time. That's been going on since the Earth formed. And it comes from the natural radioactive decay of uranium, isotope 238, and thorium, which is 232. And it's helium is a gas. But it's trapped underground after it's made. So just like gases from volcanic explosions or maybe gases in petrochemical reserves are trapped underground, so is the helium. And that's how we found it on Earth, is people were drilling for gases. And they were looking for gases that burned, that would allow heat and so forth. And they discovered that these sources of gas that they wanted to use for heat, some of the stuff didn't burn, right? And so some people thought that was a nuisance. Some people thought it was interesting. And then some people found other uses for it.
So we mentioned a third of the global supply, at least I guess as we know it, is in Qatar. A big portion's in the United States as well.
Okay, yes.
I think, right?
Yes, yeah.
And there's maybe only a couple of other places where we really are getting all of our helium. This seems to me like it could be a problem. Is it a problem?
Well, it is a problem. So like a lot of the stuff in the ground, it's not evenly distributed, right?
Yeah.
So we discovered gold in California, and we've discovered gold in Alaska.
Yeah.
And now we look for other things like the rare earth elements. So helium is trapped underground in certain rock formations and not in others.
Yeah.
And again, like exploring the rest of the globe, we root around, we dig holes, and we find out, hey, some is here and not there. So it is not evenly distributed. The early big strike, if you want to call that, in the U.S. was in the panhandle of Texas and near Kansas. But like other stuff we mine, we dig a hole, we take it out, and then it's gone. So, how much is left? You can
think of us trying to understand this in a similar way to trying to understand how much oil might be left underground.
Yeah.
So we would guess and we would make estimates, and they might get revised. And then if we discover new technology to get a hold of something, then maybe it seems like we have more. But the big challenge with helium is that once it's in our atmosphere and free to do its thing, it's gone.
Yeah.
So there's a teeny tiny amount, maybe parts per million level in the atmosphere, but it is just impractical to get it back. So every Mylar balloon, that helium is gone forever. We're not getting it back.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Linda Dorrera, professor of chemistry at Boston University, about helium. What's the upshot of this shortage? And as we mentioned, it's we had a kind of a shortage a couple of years ago. This is not the first shortage. It seems like, again, if with only a few places where we're really getting all of this helium, if one goes offline or something happens like we're seeing right now, it seems to have a real big impact on the ability of folks to get their hands on helium. How big of a problem is it? What is the upshot of the problem that we're seeing now in terms of the quote-unquote shortage?
So, like a lot of shortages, it means it costs more to get it.
Yeah.
So that'll be the relatively short-term result that you'd expect in the next few months. And so when it becomes prohibitively expensive, is how much? So one of the big uses of helium that touches almost everybody's lives today is the MRI measurement that we use for studying soft tissue injuries, right?
Yeah.
From sports players to people who've got something wrong with them. Maybe it's a cancer assessment related thing. And so if you think about all of the MRIs not working, right?
That sounds not good.
Because hospitals and insurance and the entire healthcare industry could not afford helium, or that helium wasn't available in the United States. I think that is the impact that most people would feel acutely and in a very bad way.
Are there alternatives, at least, are there alternatives to helium for something like an MRI that maybe, at least if not working as well as helium, would at least work? Or are there alternatives being explored? Like what do we do if we continue to see a helium shortage?
Well, if we think about the MRI in particular, I would say there's not an alternative, because the magnet that is a part of the magnetic resonance imaging is designed to be run with helium, right? So there's nothing else that's going to make that magnet work. These are superconducting magnets that require liquid helium to work. You can use permanent magnets, which are also magnets, but their fields are not as strong. So in terms of a diagnostic, you won't get as much information. And they're not in every hospital in the United States.
Yeah.
So we'd have to take out what we've got, put in something else. Huge and expensive infrastructure changes.
So what do we do here? This is, there's an irony in that it's the second most abundant element in the universe, and yet, it's a limited supply here on Earth. But it sounds like, maybe I'm wrong, but if it's radioactive decay that is making it sort of happen underneath us, I think our using it is probably happening faster than it's being created, which to me says at some point this is a limited resource.
It is definitely a limited resource. So what could we do? We could fill our balloons with something besides helium.
Do you think we ought to be doing that?
I definitely think so.
Really?
I think everybody who buys a helium balloon should be thinking about whether they want a helium balloon or an MRI for a person they care about.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know the numbers in detail, but I would guess that that's a significant use of helium in the United States. 5%, 10%, I don't know. But I think we should definitely not use it for that reason. And then we need to think about helium. It's often called recovery wherever we use helium. So if we go back to thinking about it in the semiconductor industry,
like capturing it before it goes away to be able to reuse it.
That's right, and that's expensive, but it is not as expensive as if the cost of helium doubles or quadruples or something like that.
And certainly not as expensive as if there was no there was no helium whatsoever, and we had to re-engineer the way we live our lives. It was what it sounds like we would have to do.
That's right. So, the idea of helium recovery, as it's called, is certainly out there. So a lot of scientific research facilities do that. They have magnets like the magnets we use in MRIs, and they keep them cold, and they try to recirculate the helium as much as possible. So it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than letting every single helium atom escape into the atmosphere.
All right, well, there you go. We've been speaking with Linda Dorrera, professor of chemistry at Boston University, about helium. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay with us. Just ahead, everything is starting to bloom. Got questions about pruning, planting, potting, petunias, peonies, or even gardening words that don't start with P? Up next, your chance to ask the gardener. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, today marks 13 years since the Boston Marathon bombings, and the city is honoring the victims. And as Boston prepares once again for Marathon Monday, our series Why I Run highlights the resilience behind the race, starting with a runner who will be running his 25th race in a row. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Framingham State University, where the strength of a Commonwealth begins with access to opportunity. At FSU, students examine evidence and serve the public good. Framingham State University. Live to the truth. Learn more at framingham.edu.
And Good Now Farms Chocolate, crafting single-origin chocolate made from directly sourced South American fine flavor cacao beans. Learn more about their crafting approach at goodnowfarms.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Join us on Friday at the Boston Public Library. We will be live in person. It is free to come. All right, spring is finally here, and for now, it actually feels like it too. So if you've been eyeing your yard and thinking, should I be pruning that? Should I cut it back? Should I wait until it leaves? Do I wait until it buds or blooms, or do I just walk away? Today, we are here to help you out. You can give us a call right now at 877-301-8970 or text us. We're talking all things early season gardening. With us in studio is a real expert, Debbie Merriam. Debbie is the executive director of the Mary M.B. Wakefield Arboretum, a full-on pruning authority ready to take your calls. She also knows about much more than just pruning. 877-301-8970. Mary, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you. It's great to be here. There are three things I love in the spring is spring itself, especially after this tough winter, plants, and public radio. So it's
well,
great.
Perfect. We're making it all happen today.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with pruning because, I mean, are we right? This is the time of year where either you should be pruning or completely not pruning, depending on what you're talking about. But that our minds are in the right place for April?
Yes.
So what should we be pruning?
So there are two ways to think about pruning. So right now we want to think that the plant has been dormant all winter and it's about to just explode.
Yeah.
So we want to prune plants now that are going to bloom later in the summer. So what we want to do is first clean out all the dead wood and then look for crossing branches and cut them out, and then create a vase shape in your plant. So when you think about plants that bloom later in the summer, we're talking about certain hydrangeas.
Yeah, well, let's talk about hydrangeas for a second, right? Because hydrangeas are everywhere here,
Yes,
right? And, but there are different kinds of hydrangeas,
right.
and they need to be treated quite differently, right?
yes,
So how do you identify what's what?
So the first thing I always say is look it up. So you look up the kind of hydrangea you have.
So know that. Like
know
you look in
that.
your yard and be like, I'm going to know what kind of hydrangea
Right.
I have,
So-
not just that it's a hydrangea.
Yeah, and not just hydrangeas, all your plants. You need to know what kind of plant they are so you know if they bloom on new wood or old wood.
Okay.
So certain hydrangeas are tricky because they bloom on last year's wood. And if they bloomed on last year's wood, you want to wait till after they bloom to prune them. But if they bloom on new wood, you want to prune them in the spring.
Okay.
So it's kind of tricky that way, but that's
Yeah.
the general rule of thumb is if you have plants like lilacs and forsythia that are about to bloom in early spring, azaleas, you want
Yeah.
to prune them after they bloom.
Okay.
But then plants that bloom later in the summer, you can prune now.
What about trees?
So trees are I would say the trees are a lot more flexible. We have a lot of different species of trees, and there are only 3 of us on the property. So we prune trees all year round.
You're just constantly kind of maintaining them.
Yeah, but it's when you think about pruning trees in the spring, you sort of want to avoid trees that produce that bleed or produce sap. So maples are not a good tree to prune in the spring, dogwoods. We try to prune those kind of trees when they're dormant in the winter.
How about just in general? I mean, is there a good place to go in terms of, if I look at my tree or my plant or whatever it is and I say, I need to prune this.
Yeah.
Then I get out there with my pruning shears, and then faced with it, I'm like, actually, which ones do I cut? Like how far do I cut it down? Where do I cut it? Where's a good place to go to sort of get a good sense of how I should be pruning?
Yeah, well, I think any reputable garden or arboretum are great examples of how things should be pruned.
Yeah.
And so we have the Arnold Arboretum. It's close by in Jamaica Plain. You can come to Milton, to the Wakefield Arboretum, and see how we prune shrubs there. But any botanical garden is a great place to go to see how things are supposed to be pruned. And also the plants are labeled, so you could figure out what you're going to be pruning and how, because you have that plant or you don't have that plant.
Well, there you go. You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Deb Merriam, Executive Director of the Mary MB Wakefield Arboretum. We're talking about spring pruning and all of your spring gardening questions. Phone lines are open, 877-301-8970. Give us a call or a text. We're going to go to the phones right now. We've got Christine in Rhode Island. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is about transplanting pretty established shrubs, like maybe 10-year-old shrubs. And do you have any tips on how to do that? In particular, if I can't get all the roots up, how much should I cut back the top growth?
Okay, and what kind of shrubs are we talking about? A bunch of different kinds of shrubs, and where are you transplanting them to?
A bunch of things. Blueberries, which I'm just going to put in a temporary location till I know where they can go. I'm trying to get them out of an area that's going to be built on, but I'm just trying to save them for later. And I have some hollies and some 9-bark. I think that's about it.
All right, a couple of different ones. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can move all of those plants now. We're having this little heat blast, but it's going to cool off again. But we like to do all of our transplanting in as early as possible in the season, so it gives the plant a little bit of time to adjust before the growth happens. If you're moving plants like blueberries and you think you're going to move them again, I would just put them in pots and water them and keep them in pots. And then when you find where you're going to put them in the ground, because that would be less stress on the plants.
And what about the question about, like, if you're trying to get down below the roots as far as you can, but if you can't get all of them out clean, what do you do there?
Okay, that's a great question. You actually don't want to do any pruning because that's going to stress the plant out even more.
Okay.
So you want to get that plant transplanted, leave it, I would say, even for 2 years before you prune it again, because you're just going to double stress it by digging it and then pruning it.
There you go. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate that call. Hopefully the blueberry transplant goes well. Speaking of pots, which you suggest she puts the blueberries in a pot if she's going to move them again, we got a text here asking about taking care of hydrangeas in a pot. Do you have any tips for taking care of a hydrangea in a pot?
The only thing is hydrangeas do use a lot of water, so you need to make sure it's watered. Even this time of year when it's this warm, it should be watered. And if you can provide some mulch or something to the top to provide some more food and more, keep the roots cooler. But otherwise, as long as the pot is big enough, it should be big enough. As the plant grows, you might have to put it in a larger pot. But otherwise, it should be perfectly fine in that pot.
All right, you listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're with Deb Merriam, Executive Director of the Mary MB Wakefield Arboretum. We're talking spring pruning. We're talking spring planting. We're talking all of your gardening questions and needs. Give us a call at 877-301-8970. That's 877-301-8970. Your chance to ask the gardener. We got a text from Paula asking why. Paula wants to know why her daffodils stop coming back after a couple of years. They put up greens even though they're supposed to be spreading daffodils. She's wondering, is there something she should be doing with the soil or whatever? So it sounds like she got spreading daffodils. A couple years she gets daffodils, and then it just starts putting up greens? Any sense of what could be happening?
Usually when that occurs, it's because somebody's picking off the flowers. So when you have daffodils, or you're cutting them down too soon. So a lot of people think once the daffodil has passed, the flower has passed, you can just cut the daffodil down. But the plant is actually still photosynthesizing and putting energy back into the bulb. So if you cut it down, it can't do that. And so you're slowly weakening the plant, and ultimately it's not going to produce flowers. But a lot of times it's because you've been picking the flowers. Not to say you can't pick the daffodils, but you have to leave some.
So you got don't just take them all. What's it? I mean, generally speaking, how many is leaving some? Like, do you know what I mean? Is it like half of them? Is it like a third of them?
Yeah, I would leave at least a half.
At least a half.
If they're super vigorous, you could take more than a half. But if they're not very vigorous, I wouldn't.
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy, and wait for them to establish. Like and also when you plant daffodils, don't just put one bulb in the hole. You should put 7 or 8, so they're a clumping plant, and that way you get a clump of daffodils.
All right, so clumps of daffodils. We're gonna go to the phones. We've got Irene in Acton. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk. This is your chance to ask the gardener. Go for it, Irene.
Thank you. Last year I created a trellis by taking some wire and putting it at an angle attached to a wall on my outside, wall, and then I planted native honeysuckle at its base.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of put the wire so that it made a zigzag.
Clever.
And what's happened is the honeysuckle twined around the wire nicely, but it kind of didn't perform great last year, but it did climb and twine around those wires. And this year, it's leafing out from the top down, even growing at the top. It's branching out at the top. And I'm wondering how much should I prune that down for maximum good growth. All
right, so how are we going to prune the honeysuckle, which is neatly and nicely, I guess, tangled around a wire in a zigzag somewhere outside of a wall at your place? Yes?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I would suggest if you just planted it last year, I would wait to prune it for one more year. Let it establish, let it do its thing. If it's twirling out of control beyond the trellis, you could put it back onto the trellis, or you could cut it back slightly. But it's a relatively young plant, and honeysuckles do like to establish, especially the native ones. So I would let it go for another year before you cut it back at all.
Is that thank you, Irene. Does that hopefully that's helpful? So no pruning this year. Give us a call next year when we do this segment. We'll talk to you about how to prune it. Sound good?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In general, that idea of like you said a young plant, I think. Like early on, if something's planted 1 year, 2 year, is it generally like you don't really do pruning in the beginning, or is it plant dependent?
It can be plant dependent. I definitely recommend not doing any pruning except dead wood and broken branches when you just get the plant from the nursery and plant it, because again, it's already stressed out from being in the pot and moving into the ground.
Yeah.
The second year is more plant dependent. You want to be able to do some shaping, especially on some of your younger trees. But I usually, for the rule of thumb for shrubs, we might do a very light pruning on a 2-year-old shrub.
Let's talk about trees just for a second. Is it like this time of year? Is this, if I'm thinking about planting a new tree in my yard, or is this the time to be doing it? Is now tree planting time, or does it depend on the tree?
Yes, it's tree planting time now. It's everything planting time except certain bulbs which get planted in the fall. But yeah, it's a great time to purchase plants because the nurseries are bursting with plant materials, so you'll get a nice selection. A lot of the times the trees are still slightly dormant, and that's helpful when you're planting the tree, so it'll get in the ground. You'll water it, provide mulch, plant it very carefully. I recommend maybe watching a video if you haven't planted a tree before, and make sure you provide it with some support, especially if it's over a 1-inch caliper, because it could be swaying a little bit. You want to make sure it's stable in the ground.
All right. Good.
So it's a great time to plant trees.
Great time to plant trees out there, folks. We're going to go back to the phones. We've got Steve in Watertown. Steve, welcome to the Curiosity Desk. This is your chance to ask the gardener. Make it a good one.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for letting me on. I listen almost every day. Great show.
Thank you.
I recently just got a magnolia tree from the town. I went there to get compost, and they were giving away these saplings. And this one, it's a good 5 feet tall, and I want to plant it in the ground. So any pointers for that?
Great timing, Steve. We were just talking about trees, so take it away.
Yeah.
How should he be planting this magnolia tree?
Magnolias in New England are very special because they're one of the first flowering plants, and the colors just make you think, okay, finally spring is here.
Yeah.
But they actually, magnolias have a tendency to have weak wood. So again, if you plant the magnolia now, make sure it is supported. And make sure you understand the type of magnolia and how big it's going to get. A lot of times a tree will get really big and you might have a small yard.
Plant a little sapling like right close to your house, and then in a couple of years, look out.
And so there are some smaller magnolias which are great for a smaller property, but make sure you know how big the plant is going to get before you choose a site.
Steve, do you got a site? Do you got a site that you're thinking about for it? You got a spot for it in your mind?
I do, and I'm sorry, I really don't know what type it is. I'm guessing that it could get really big, and I hear that they tend to spread out wide, too.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like we know it was one type which we like, which is the free type. I mean, that's a great type of magnolia, Steve. So we're glad about that. So how might Steve find out what it is? What's a
I would call the town. If the town is giving away free plants, I'm assuming that they know what they are. I'm assuming it's a native plant if the town is giving them away, but not necessarily. I mean, but that would be the first way you could tell. And then when it flowers, you might be able to tell from the flowers because magnolias have distinctive looking flowers.
All right, Steve, good luck with the magnolia. We hope it all works out well for you. Thank you for the call. Going back to the text line, we got a question about pruning roses. Do I cut back growing shoots now is the question.
Yes. So in New England, you want to cut roses, the non-vining roses. Vining roses you want to cut after they bloom. Non-vining roses you want to prune when the forsythia is blooming, which is right now. So you want to cut the rose back. You want to cut roses back quite hard, so maybe even 2 feet
What does it mean
tall.
to cut back hard?
So you can be slightly aggressive with your pruners.
Got
so
it.
You don't have to be so
careful.
gentle and careful.
Just like
yeah, right.
Nice.
You always want to cut right above the bud, and that encourages more growth. So.
Another text asking another transplant question. Can a peonies plant, which has been in the same place for about 5 years, be safely transplanted or at this time, or is it only in the fall after it's blossomed?
The peonies are just starting to come out of the ground. I would think you would be okay. Just make sure you keep it well watered, and once you transplant it, peonies are actually pretty tough. So I would go ahead and move peonies now.
Yeah. Move the peonies now. So hopefully that's helpful for you out there. We're going to go back to the phones. We got Sue in Norwood. Sue, welcome to the Curiosity Desk. Your chance to ask the gardener. Sue, are you with us? Sue in Norwood.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Welcome. You did it.
I would think you would be I'm listening to the gardener about peonies. So
turn your radio down. The classic call-in problem. Yeah, turn your radio down and go ahead and ask your question.
All right. My question has to do with an area that I've re-landscaped. I'm trying to figure out, as the sun shifts, as the year moves forward, through summer, fall, spring, summer, actually, how to gauge what to plant where. And I know that's a big question.
Yeah.
But essentially I've got, there's a pathway. And one side of the pathway is more of a PM, probably like 11:30 to 1:30 exposure. And then the other side is probably a lengthier exposure.
The sunny side of the street, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably not a practical question because.
Sue, thanks for the question. We appreciate it. Thanks for the call. I think it is a good question because I think a lot of people have kind of mixed sun environments. So what do you do there?
So it's important to understand what the needs of the plant are, because there's a lot of plants that can live in partial sun, full sun, or even full shade. So you need to do a little research on the plants that you're putting in and see how much sun they require to thrive. So if it sounds like one part of the your garden is going to get more sun, I would put full sun plants in that part of the garden, and then in the other part that doesn't get as much sun, put the plants that can deal with partial shade.
All right. Good advice from our gardener, Deb Merriam, Executive Director of the Mary W.B. Wakefield Arboretum. We're taking your calls at 877-301-8970. Question on a text here. Can I use wood ashes from my wood stove instead of lime as my annual spring soil conditioner?
That's a good question. Actually, we have wood fires at the Arboretum. That's how we heat some of the buildings. And we save up all the ashes, and then we sprinkle them around the woody plants. We don't really use them on our perennials very much, and we don't use a lot. So we do use the wood ash, and it seems to help because we don't actually do any fertilizer beyond that besides using mulch. But yeah, I think that's fine.
We think it's fine. All right, I think we have time for one more call. We're going to go to Jim in the car. Jim in the car, I hope you are driving safely. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk. Go ahead and ask your question, but keep your eyes on the road.
I'm pulled over. Thank you.
Good man.
Two-part question. Sorry. I'd like to transplant a viburnum and also a burning bush that had some of the bark eaten off of it by rabbits. Can I move both of those right now?
Yes, you can move both of those. Yeah, there's been a lot of rabbit damage this year because we had so much snow. I'm surprised we haven't had a question about rabbits.
I mean, I had a question in my back pocket about rabbits ate all kinds of stuff all
that they
over
don't
my
normally
neighborhood.
Eat.
Yeah,
normally
because they
eat,
could get up there, right?
Yeah.
So what's the answer here? What do we do?
I mean, these are a little tricky. So for one thing, burning bush is highly invasive. So I would ask you to actually not replant that.
So transplant that to the trash, Jim.
Yes, thank you. But the viburnums, viburnums require a lot of water also. It depends on the type of viburnum. If it's had a good, healthy year last year and it's not too large, I would go ahead and move it now.
All right. So just before I let you go, on the rabbit damage, if I do have stuff in my yard that has been, like a blueberry bush or tree or something where it's been eaten up by a rabbit, what do I do? Is it just like cross your fingers and hope it's still alive or what?
Yeah. So if it's a deciduous plant, you can cut back some of where the rabbit damage occurred. But if it's a evergreen plant or a conifer, it's not going to grow back. They do not regrow except things like yews. So unfortunately, that might be a lost cause. But otherwise, most plants will be okay unless they really were decimated by the rabbits.
All right. Thanks to everybody for their calls and texts. Sorry to those we could not get to. We will have Deb Merriam back if she'll have us some other time. But we have been speaking with Deb Merriam, Executive Director of the Mary M.B. Wakefield Arboretum, about all things spring pruning and spring gardening stuff. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And right now we're going to turn our attention to the Boston Public Library and Jared Bowen. Jared, have you planted a lot of stuff? What do you got going on?
It's all perennials, so they all come up on their own at this point.
You are so smart.
I'll plant more later this summer.
Very, very smart.
Or spring, I should say.
Well, what do you have going on in the show today down there at the library live?
We are leading off with sea shanties and maritime songs today. With the band Sharks Come Cruisin is joining us for a live performance. Actually, 2 performances. We'll have a whole conversation by this really fabulous band right here in the studio who will be joining me in just a moment. Vanessa Bumpus, one of our favorite guests from the Museum of Worcester, is here to talk about Worcester to the Stars, the Goddard Rocket Centennial. People may or may not realize that the liquid-fueled rocket was invented right here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it went 42 feet. Now we can go to the moon.
Exactly. So we'll expand on that history and all that they have to bring to bear to space history in their exhibition right now. And then Nathan Allen Davis will join us about the other marathon coming to Boston. That would be the Boston Theater Marathon. 50 10-minute plays, all in one marathon day.
Sounds excellent. It sounds like an excellent show. That's Jared Bowen and the Culture Show live at the Boston Public Library studio, coming your way in about a minute and a half. As for us, that does it for today. Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, Hannah Loss, and Nicole Garcia. Patty Daniels is our nitrogen-rich soil. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker. Special thanks to Andrew Massawa and Colin Cockerell. We will be right back here in 23 short hours on GBH 89.7 and streaming live on YouTube. If you can't wait that long, check out the podcast edition of the show. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Landvest Christie's International Real Estate, an independent brokerage representing residential and investment properties for buyers and sellers across New England and the Adirondacks since 1968. More at landvest.com. Historians, descendants, and archaeologists search for information about the deaths and lost burial site of more than 20 Black Civil War soldiers. Watch Secrets of the Dead, The Civil War's Lost Massacre, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Culture Show News Desk, I'm Henry Santoro at the Boston Public Library.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, batten down the hatches. Sharks Come Cruisin' is coming aboard The Culture Show with a live performance of sea shanties and maritime songs that are briny, forceful, and built to be sung together. In their sea salty way, the Providence group combines the enchantment of old maritime work music with the power of many voices setting sail as one. Then we blast into outer space by way of Robert Goddard. A century after he launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in Auburn, Massachusetts, Museum of Worcester brings that breakthrough back down to Earth. A new exhibition traces how one launch helped create the space age, and why Worcester still has a claim on that history. And as Boston laces up for Marathon Monday, we're gearing up for a different endurance event, the Boston Theater Marathon, where playwrights, actors, and audiences go the distance together. We'll get a preview of this one-day relay of 50 10-minute plays. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen, live on 89.7 from the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. You're listening to The Culture Show, and we're listening to Sharks Come Cruisin'.
Well, I thought I heard the captain say, pay me my money down, tomorrow be your sailing day. Pay me my money down. I said, pay me, you owe me. Pay me my money down, pay me or go to jail. Pay me my money down.
As you can hear, the Providence-based six-piece band draws on sea shanties and maritime music with both audience participation and celebration at the center of their performances. The group also hosts the PVD Shanty Sing, a regular Providence gathering that carries that same communal spirit. I'm joined now by Sharks Come Cruisin' founder, musician Mark Lambert, and his wife, Erica Sachs, the band's melodica player. Mark, Erica, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
And you come bearing bandmates and two performances with us today, which we're excited to hear. But Mark, let me start with you. And how did this come to fruition?
I've been playing music for a while. I'm 51. I've been playing music since I was 16. And my early days with performing were definitely louder. I was in a lot of punk bands in Providence. And then as I got older and didn't want to be out late nights, and I could see the trajectory of things changing a little bit, I was looking for something that would be more in line with maybe playing solo, maybe playing more acoustic. And I struggled with what that should be. At the time that I was going through what many of my peers the same age were going through, they were gravitating to more country or blues. And growing up in Rhode Island, I just had a hard time with the authenticity piece of playing country songs or the blues being from New England. So I just spun for a while, not knowing what I was going to do. And then I was watching Jaws one evening, the film Jaws, and the character of Quint sang Spanish Ladies. And I thought at that moment that I knew that from my elementary schooling that there were songs like Drunken Sailor, What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor or Blow the Man Down, and now I'm hearing this other song called Spanish Ladies, and I went to the Providence Public Library that next week and looked up some of these songs and discovered that there was a whole genre of sea shanties that were singing about towns that I grew up in. I visited New Bedford, Providence, Boston, and that set me on a path to learn those songs, and here we are many, many years later, still performing them.
Well, Erica, let me bring you in here. How would you describe the concert experience that you all have when you bring the sea shanties, the music, and the audience together?
Yeah, sea shanties are really, they're really special because they are designed to bring a group of people together to do work on a boat or, sometimes just to sing when they're bored and out at sea for a long time. So they're meant to be an audience participation, or actually there is no audience really in the real world of sea shanties. It's just a group of people all singing together, with the goal of sailing their ship to a destination or maybe just getting through a bad night.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that history. And as Erica has talked about, that these were created to be work songs, to bring everybody in unison. Anybody who's ever wrote about may start to have a sense of that. Tell us a little bit more, a little history lesson of the purpose and the derivation of sea shanties and their myriad purposes on vessels.
Yeah, I'll take my best shot, and then I'm going to let the expert talk about it a little bit more. But as I understand these songs, there's a lot of heavy work that needs to happen. So these songs were all pre any kind of combustible engine. So like you would be raising sail or raising an anchor, very heavy work to do. And in order to do that, you need multiple individuals, and you need them to be doing something in time. So to get that timing correct for that heavy work, they would sing songs, and then when they were pulling in unison, they would all know the right place to pull. So then I'll throw it over to Erica.
Erica, you've done your history on this, your research on this.
Yeah, so I actually was a tall ship sailor for 7 years, so I have experienced sailing a ship with the power of sea shanties to help us. And when you're on a traditionally rigged sailing vessel, a lot of the parts of the boat are very heavy. And in order to raise sail or to raise the anchor, you need force multiplied. It's really a physics lesson. So 5-10 people, if they're not all hauling at the same time, then you don't have their combined force. And so the goal of the shanty is to ensure that everybody hauls on the line, and some of them are for a short burst of energy and some of them are for longer, more endurance activities. But I have raised anchor to many of these songs before.
And now here you are before an audience singing them. Did you see that in your future?
Not really.
No. Well, as I mentioned, you're going to perform for us. Mark, what's the first song that you're all performing?
We'll perform a more traditional work song called Eliza Lee, and then we will transition into more of a folksal song or an entertainment song called 10,000 Miles Away.
All right, well, I will invite you to join your bandmates just behind me for the two songs that you're going to be performing. Again, we are talking to Erica Sachs and Mark Lambert of Sharks Come Cruisin. You can catch them for their 12th anniversary of the PVD Shanty Sing at the Parlor in Providence on May 8th, and a duo set at Aiden's in Bristol, Rhode Island on May 10th. You can always check on all these dates on their website, Sharks Come Cruisin. And again, this is Eliza Lee, and they'll be transitioning into 10,000 Miles Away.
You must done. Roll wildcat on the swallowtail line. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Tell me a rig a jig and a jaunting car. Oh, way, oh, you must done. Eliza Lee, all on my knee. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Oh, the old wildcat on the swallowtail line. Oh, way, oh, you must done. Never a day behind the time. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Tell me a rig a jig and a jaunting car. Oh, way, oh, you must done. Eliza Lee, all on my knee. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Oh, when I get back to Liverpool town. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Stangy whiskeys all around. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Tell me, hey, rig a jig and a jaunting car. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Eliza Lee, all on my knee. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Oh, when I get back to New York town. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Well, dance you Bowery girls around. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Tell me, hey, rig a jig and a jaunting car. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Eliza Lee, all on my knee. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Oh, when I get home from across the sea. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Eliza, will you marry me? Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Tell me, hey, rig a jig and a jaunting car. Oh, way, ho, you must done. Eliza Lee, all on my knee. Clear away the track and let the bull giant run. Sing ho to a brave and a gallant ship and a fair and favorite breeze, with a bully crew and a captain too to carry me over the seas. Carry me over the seas, me boys, and my true love far away. Never forget my own true love 10,000 miles away. And it's blow, you winds and blow, and a roll and I will go. Spend no more on England shore to hear the fiddlers play. I'm on the move to my own true love 10,000 miles away. My true love, she was beautiful, and my true love, she did say, taking a trip on a government ship bound out for Botany Bay. Bound out for Botany Bay, me boys, and though she's far away, never forget my own true love 10,000 miles away. Blow your winds and blow, and a row and I will go. Spend no more on England shore to hear the fiddlers play. I'm on the move to my own true love 10,000 miles away. It was a summer's morn when last I seen me May. She'd a government band around each hand and another one round each leg. Another one round each leg, me boys, as the big ship left the bay. She says, remember me when I'm in Botany Bay. Just blow your winds and blow, and a row and I will go. Spend no more on England shore to hear the fiddlers play. I'm on the move to my own true love 10,000 miles away. Well, the sun may shine through the London fog, and the river may be clear, and the ocean brine may taste like wine if I forget me beer. If I forget me beer, me boys of the landlord for to pay. Never forget my own true love 10,000 miles away. Just blow your winds and blow, and a rope and I will go. Spend no more on England shore to hear the fiddlers say, I'm on the move to my own true love 10,000 miles away.
That is Sharks Come Cruisin'. We have been listening to musicians Mark Lambert, Matt Everett, Michael Bilodeau, James Toomey, Eric Rugamuth, and Erica Sachs. They are a Providence-based band. Those were their two songs, Eliza Lee and 10,000 Miles Away. You can hear them yourself and see them yourself in person for the PVD Shanty Sing at the Parlor in Providence on May 8th and at Aiden's in Bristol, Rhode Island on May 10th. Welcome back to the desk. That was so much fun listening to you. I wonder where your punk rock roots come into the music we just heard.
That's a great question. So when I heard the songs initially, to me, they were just very punk. I don't know if the Sailors were the first punks or not, but the call and response, I grew up in the hardcore punk scene, and there's a lot of this that goes on at those shows, the singer giving the microphone to the audience. And when I heard these songs, it was just a very natural fit as far as this is what I've grown up seeing and playing. It's just taken from a much different context.
And then what's the writing, the composition, the instrumentation that comes into play here? Because of course all those instruments aren't going to be found aboard ships.
It's true. And we've kind of picked folks up along the way here. It started just as a three-piece, and then I think the instruments that we do have would be more traditional. If you were going to bring an instrument onto a ship, it may be an accordion, maybe a fiddle, maybe a banjo. So I think that part of it to me seems more natural. Having a bass player, I'm not sure that the sailing ships would have a bass player aboard, but you never know.
But you're happy to keep him aboard. Erica, to go back to the history, as I think we can testify to the energy that we just felt here in the library, how much of we know that they were work songs, but how much are they morale songs too, especially for people out at sea for months on end?
Yeah, so Mark alluded to this earlier. So, there are sea shanties which are work songs, and then sea shanties which are sometimes called forecastle songs. So the forecastle is the forward compartment of the ship where the sailors, not the officers, but the sailors would live, and that's where they would hang out when they came off watch. And there's not a lot to do at sea for months at a time, so sometimes they would sing, and sometimes they would sing sad songs about people they'd left at home, and sometimes they would sing happy songs. And so 10,000 Miles Away is, would be a morale lifting song, for sure, yeah.
And what's been your process of excavation going through all of these songs? You mentioned the songs that resonated with you because they reference local places, but to bring them back into the 21st century?
That's a great question. The beginning of researching these songs was definitely all vinyl records that I pulled from the Providence Public Library. Shout out to libraries. Without them, we're in dire straits. So this band really owes itself to the Providence Public Library. And reading these liner notes from these great old vinyl records that were released in the as early as the 50s, 60s, 70s, kind of the folk revival. Many times, many of the artists are doing all of the same songs. There's like one canon of it, but picking out different what different bands did with it, and then throwing our own spin on it. So I would pick a version that I really liked, something that I thought was hard driving, and then bring it to the band. And we've only really recently, the band's been together for 20 some odd years. The last 10 years started doing them more a cappella, like the first one that we did, which I'm enjoying as I get older.
And Erica, why do you find that these are so resonant today? It obviously totally different circumstances, different context, but people always love to hear sea shanties for some reason.
I mean, sea shanties were meant to be simple sing-along songs, right? So, singing with your friends it's a very powerful experience, whatever it is that you're singing. And sea shanties are meant to be easy to sing. They weren't supposed to be complicated musically. They weren't, sometimes I give Mark a hard time because I don't know how much harmonizing was happening at sea, even though it sounds lovely. A lot of times the shantymen would make up words as they went along, so it wasn't until way later that the song started to be written down and maybe formalized, and it's very organic. And so I think even today, everybody, I think, can really appreciate the experience of being part of music as it's happening and not just listening to it passively.
We are so grateful that you brought it here to the library, brought it back to the library, I guess, now completely understanding this history. You have one more song that you're going to perform for us today. What is that song?
It's called Boston Harbor.
Well, that's very appropriate. I guess it needs no more introduction. You're going to play us out today, so I'll tell people what's coming up on the show and invite you back over again to join your bandmates. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
You're going, as I mentioned, you're playing us out. The musicians of Sharks Come Cruisin' are Mark Lambert, Matt Everett, Michael Bilodeau, James Toomey, Eric Vugamuth, and Erica Sachs. You can catch them for the 12th anniversary of their PVD Shanty Sing at the Parlor in Providence on May 8th, and a duo set at Aiden's in Bristol, Rhode Island on May 10th. To keep on top of all things Sharks Come Cruisin', check out their website. And coming up next on the show, 100 years of Robert Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, and Museum of Worcester is marking that centennial with a space-age centennial exhibition, complete with a piece of Mars that you can touch. That's next on The Culture Show. But again, before we go, once again, Sharks Come Cruisin'.
and the devil have his soul. Dreary down, 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 dreary down, 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 dreary down, 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 dreary down.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, today marks 13 years since the Boston Marathon bombings, and the city is honoring the victims. And as Boston prepares once again for Marathon Monday, our series Why I Run highlights the resilience behind the race, starting with a runner who will be running his 25th race in a row. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education, offering 2 to 3 day courses and executive certificates for professionals seeking cutting-edge business insights on innovation, cybersecurity, AI, and more. Info at executive.mit.edu. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering local, long-distance office and piano moving with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering private cooking events for your next team-building activity, family reunion, birthday party, or night out. You can learn more at cambridgeculinary.com.
The GBH News app is your home for trusted local news, so you can get the news you need and get on with the rest of your day. Come for a quick scroll, not a doom scroll. Download the GBH News app today on the App Store or Google Play.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show live on 89.7 from the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. A century ago, in a field in Auburn, Massachusetts, Robert Goddard launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. It was a brief flight, lasting just 2.5 seconds, but it was a turning point in also launching the space age. Goddard was born and educated in Worcester, performed pioneering research at Clark University, and spent years imagining a future that much of the world was not yet ready to take seriously. Now, Museum of Worcester is marking that centennial with Worcester to the Stars, the Goddard Rocket Centennial, an exhibition that brings together artifacts and images from Clark University, NASA, the Smithsonian, and other collections. The show looks not only at the launch itself, but also at Worcester's place in the story of American rocketry, and at the network of people and institutions that helped shape and preserve Goddard's legacy. Joining me to talk about it all is Vanessa Bumpus, exhibition coordinator at Museum of Worcester. Welcome back to the show. Great to see you as always.
Thank you, Jared. Great to see you too.
For people who don't know this history, this is a big history.
Very big.
Especially right now as we're reoriented towards space with the Artemis mission. But first of all, what was in Robert Goddard's biography that made him so driven for this?
Well, he's very sick as a child. He's an only child. He loses a brother to a spinal deformity before the age of 1. He was a big reader. He doesn't go to school till he's almost 18 years old.
18?
Yes, because he was so sick, and his mother and grandmother were very overprotective, kept him at their house at Talawanda Drive in Worcester. He read, Jules Verne, From Earth to the Moon, War of the Worlds, and was just obsessed with this idea of getting to the moon and getting off the planet Earth. So he cuts down he's told to cut down a cherry tree in their backyard. He climbs up on October 19th. For the rest of his life in his journal, he writes, this is anniversary day. And that's when he decides he's going to figure out a way to get to the moon. But in 1938, the hurricane comes through and takes out the tree. And he writes in his journal, tree gone, must go at it alone. Ugh. So the tree was kind of the anchor point. And at the house, they've recently replanted the tree, the cherry tree. So that's back at the Goddard house in Worcester.
So his house still exists?
His house is still there, yes.
Now, let's move to the rocket launch. How did he arrive at what would ultimately take us into space?
Well, he's not the first rocket scientist. He's probably not even the third rocket scientist. People were researching this all over the world. He's the one that does it successfully. And the whole part of Goddard's is the liquid fuel. Everyone was trying to do it with a solid component, and it's the liquid you want. So there's no hydrogen, which is what we use now. So he's mixing oxygen and kerosene. So what could go wrong? he's using that, and he decides he finally gets it right. He had written papers for the Smithsonian, and he had been ridiculed in the press before that first launch. The New York Times writes a horrible editorial that, why are we giving this man money? It's not going to happen.
Well, let's back up. So, to get that part of the story. So this isn't somebody who's working in a silo trying to do this. People are aware of his own space race.
Yeah, he's working at WPI, where he's a student and eventually becomes a teacher. He's teaching at Clark, and he applies in 1914 for his first patent for a rocket apparatus. Then in 1919, the Smithsonian gets an idea of what he's doing, and they give him money. And then it goes to the press, and the New York Times writes a scathing editorial that basically this man's crazy. They call him Mooney Goddard.
Which happens so often, where people are dismissed, especially when they're so singular or out in front or among just a few who at that time were doing rocket science. Before we get to the launch, how did it affect him?
It affected him deeply. He really starts keeping to himself. He doesn't want to share his research. He keeps it very, very private. The U.S. government is interested in what he's doing, but he's not ready and doesn't want to share his research because he doesn't want to be ridiculed. And he's ridiculed all over the world. There's comics from England and Germany that are just saying, this guy's crazy. There's no way we can get to the moon. But in 1969, there's a happy ending. 3 days before we land on the moon, the New York Times apologizes.
But he was gone by this point.
He was gone by then. But his wife, Esther, was still around.
So we'll get to her in a moment, too.
Yeah.
But so we go to the launch. What is he prepared? What is he hoping that will manifest that day?
He's hoping it goes up. And he's correct. It's him, Esther, who's filming everything, his assistant, Henry Sachs, who lights the rocket, and one of his students, Percy Roop. And the film in Esther's camera runs out right before that first launch. So there's no footage of it actually going up. But his assistant lights it, and it really is, you just light it from the top and you run. That's how you launch a Goddard rocket. It's none of this high-tech countdown we have today. It's light it and run. And it goes up 2.5 seconds. It doesn't go far. It doesn't go that high, but it works. And that's the first step. And that is still the same technology NASA's using today, except the light it and run part. But they're using the same concepts that Dr. Goddard did.
Well, and there's an audience there to see it that day.
There's only 4 people. It's at his Aunt Effie's cabbage farm in Auburn. And it's just the 4 of them, and they light it, and that's it. They're the only witnesses to the first launch.
So how does this, first of all, that still exists too, but not as a cabbage farm.
No, it is a golf course now. So if you go to the 9th hole at the Packagug Golf Course, there is a marker of where Dr. Goddard launches the first rocket.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, how, once word spread that he was actually able to do this, how did this begin to change this study, and how did this, again, put the building blocks in place for lunar missions?
Well, his
space missions.
Yeah, his research gets more and more elaborate. In 1929, he launches a rocket that causes a major brush fire in Worcester, and the fire marshal says, "You're done. You have to go." So he goes to Fort Devens for about a year where he does some experiments but no launches. But at this point, he's gotten the ear of some people, and one of those people is Charles Lindbergh, who we know likes aviation, right? So he is sent out to Worcester by Harry Guggenheim of the Guggenheim family, who was also interested in aviation and wants to see if this guy is legit. And Charles Lindbergh comes back and says, this guy knows what he's doing. So Harry says, I will fund you, but you have to leave Massachusetts. So he goes to Roswell, New Mexico, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the weather is better. It's not New England. And number 2, there's more open space. So he can build a 50-foot tower and launch larger rockets. All of his crew that were with him in Worcester go with him to Roswell, New Mexico. They pack up their families, the workshop, and they all go there and start this next phase of research that is now being funded.
I'm speaking to Vanessa Bumpus, the Museum of Worcester's exhibition coordinator. We're talking about Worcester to the Stars, the Goddard Rocket Centennial, on view at the Museum of Worcester through August 1st. You have a bunch of notebooks at your disposal that are part of this exhibition.
Yeah.
You talked about how he recorded his own dismissals and the effect that had on him, but what else do they reveal about how he continued to move forward on this expedition until his death?
Well, he keeps a journal every day of his life from the age of 10 till he dies at the age of 62. And those journals are all at Clark University as part of their collection. It's just a chronicling of him, of the weather, whether the rocket failed, whether it went well. Every time Guggenheim comes to see a launch, it fails. It's never successful when he's there, but he was able to see other footage from Esther. But it's even just him talking about new technology, what other people are doing, new radio stations that they had found in Roswell, and sometimes it's just simple entries of their day-to-day life there.
So you mentioned his wife, Esther. Mm-hmm. How did she come into this as a collaborator?
So they meet when she is the secretary of the president of Clark University. She's 23 years his junior. And she stands by him from day one, completely believes in what he's doing. But the thing about Goddard is that in Worcester, we had the best patent attorneys. So all of his research was patented. And Esther was well aware of that. So when NASA comes around in the 50s and they're starting to use his technology, Esther says, I don't think so. She sues them for $1 million.
That's pretty audacious.
It's very audacious. She has the Guggenheims backing her up because they had funded all of his research. And the government doesn't want people to not like this new organization called NASA. They want public support, so they pay her. And they pay her $1 million. It's about $11.5 million today. Probably about the price of the Artemis toilet is what I've been thinking that they had put in the ship. Probably about the same number.
And so how and where was he at this point? So he dies in 1945.
Yeah.
But he was gone at this point when they wanted this technology.
Yeah, he's gone at this point, so Esther protects his legacy. She sues them, and she files 270 more patents after he dies. So she's continuing the process. She also gathers up all his journals, books, patents, letters, and she gives those to Clark University. And the Goddard Library is built in his honor, and they have all of those items today.
So speaking of items, tell me what people can experience at the Museum of Worcester right now in terms of getting this very, very palpable sense of this history.
Yeah, so we have actually one of his original bases from one of his launches, and it's from the 1929 launch, right before he starts the brush fire. And we have a replica rocket, so you can actually see the scale of what he was working with. And, you know, we see these today, these multi-stage rockets. They drop the booster. This is a one-stage rocket. You light it, and it goes. So we have that, and then we're very lucky to get a call from Roswell, New Mexico, the Roswell Museum, where Goddard had a workshop, and they sent us some items from their collection. They had a devastating flood in 2024, and their museum is closed until 2030. So they very kindly sent us one of his combustion engines that had exploded.
Flood or reburying aliens out there?
The river next to their museum burst through their front doors.
Oof,
yes,
that's awful.
Yes, so they are closed, and they have quite an elaborate collection. So they kindly sent us some stuff. So they have they sent us a combustion engine. They sent us one of the nose cones from one of his rockets, and they sent us his briefcase, which we then tracked back to a photo in NASA's collection of him holding the briefcase. So you can actually see him with the briefcase. And then we have his Congressional Medal, we have his Guggenheim Medal, Esther's typewriter that she typed all his notes on. She was the only one that could read his handwriting. So she typed all his notes, so her typewriter is at the museum. And then we have items from David Clark Company.
Well, let me stop you again because we'll go back to those because we've been hearing a lot about David Clark Company, especially with the Artemis mission and the role Worcester continues to have in space exploration. But the Congressional Medal, for instance, again, this comes long after his death. At what point did people really begin to recognize and celebrate his role in all of this?
As we're getting closer to landing on the moon. That's when it really clicks with people that this is going to work. We had launched, the smaller capsules and things, but as we get really closer to that step on the moon, it traces back to Goddard and that he was the one that was really doing the research. But at this time, the U.S. has hired a German, Werner von Braun, who had been following Goddard all along. And this is pre-internet, so he's going through newspapers, and he comes to Worcester when they make the marker on Packagug Hill and settles up to Esther to see what else she has from Goddard. So the U.S. government winds up hiring him to kind of lead our rocket program.
How much espionage was happening here too? When people are figuring out what this man is onto, and we know that the global space race would eventually be underway, to what extent was that happening?
I think everyone was keeping eyes on him, but they weren't sure because the U.S. government doesn't even hire him until 1941. It's over 20 years after the first launch. So they hire him right before, and World War II ends in 45. So, they're keeping an eye on it. So he doesn't even work for them that long because he passes away.
So back to the David Clark Company.
Yes.
So how does that come into play too? And tell people why they remain so significant, including with this latest lunar mission that we were just all watching.
Obsessed with the Artemis mission, the Moon Joy. They are still making the suits there in Worcester. We have a suit from John Young, who was the 9th man on the moon in this exhibition. And we have an original David Clark anti-G suit from 1941. But those suits are still sewn in Worcester. I'll tell you a funny story. In our Fuller Gallery, we have a large photo of the suits being sewn. And I had gone to David Clark with our photographer. And the 4 names above me on the sign-in sheet from the day before were Victor, Christina, Reed and Jeremy, they had been there the day before getting fitted for their suits. It said Artemis, and I was like, oh, Museum of Worcester, super boring. But the image in our Fuller Gallery is those suits being sewn, which we did not know at the time until last week.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, you also have something that quite captivated me. I talked about it all morning long. You have a piece of Mars that people can touch.
We do. We have a small meteorite that people can touch. We actually have it hanging right under the picture of the cherry tree, in which Goddard had decided, because when he first climbs that tree, he doesn't say he's going to get to the moon. He says he's going to get to Mars. And look where we are today, not that far from that first step onto Mars. So his dream is becoming more of a reality every day.
So how have you just said you have the moon joy from watching this mission. How have you found people respond to your exhibition, especially as that has come back into public discourse?
It's been very exciting. People, first of all, we always tell people you can't get to the moon without Worcester. It all starts here with Dr. Goddard. So there's been a renewed interest in that. And then obviously the David Clark publicity. And we have a couple of other David Clark items in the museum. So I think people are just really excited about this next step. It's intelligent conversation. It's exciting conversation. And it's just out there, just like Dr. Goddard, waiting for us all to see what happens.
Have subsequent astronauts paid homage and made pilgrimages to Worcester?
I will say, so one of
outside of being fitted for uniforms.
One of Dr. Goddard's students at WPI, and I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Aldrin, and he was the father of Buzz Aldrin. When Buzz goes to the moon, he takes a small book about the size of a business card about Robert Goddard with him. And he signs that book, and that's at Clark University. So Goddard does, in some way, make it to the moon, even though it's in form of a book.
And I know you have a host of public programs are coming up. How can people further experience this, even beyond the confines of the museum?
So next Friday, on the 24th, we'll be participating in Highland Street Foundation's Great Spring Week program. So we'll have a free Worcester to the Stars Day, and we've got guided tours coming up all through May, and we do those on people's launch hour, we call it, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you check our website and our social media, those will all be up, and we'll be doing a bunch of programs for the summer. We're getting into astronomy and telescopes and all kinds of things. So keep track, and hopefully we'll have David Clark by to talk to people soon.
Well, before I let you go, I want to go, because we are the Culture Show, I want to return to something you were just talking about in how he was inspired by literature, H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. How is there an understanding of how those ideas, how those stories and narratives settled into him?
I think it was just a way for him to kind of keep time when he was home alone. He didn't have many friends. He wasn't a social butterfly. He kind of falls into that stereotype of a cranky science professor. Esther was the social one. But that is really how I have found in research is how he kept his time. He surrounded himself with books, looking for bugs in the backyard, creating science experiments. When he was younger, he would rub his feet on the carpet for static electricity. So it's all basic stuff we all do, but he just really takes it a step further.
And he was doing that starting at age 5.
Age 5. He has his first microscope and subscription to Scientific American at age 5.
Well, it's always apparent, I think. When genius is there, you know very early
Very
on.
true. Very true.
Well, Vanessa Bumpus, always great to see you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this story with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Worcester to the Stars, the Goddard Rocket Centennial is on view at the Museum of Worcester through August 1st. To learn more, check out their website. Again, thank you so much. Vanessa Bumpus is the museum's exhibition coordinator. Coming up, the Marathon Theaters Run will have a preview of the Boston Theater Marathon, presenting 50 10-minute plays and one exhilarating day of drama. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
From a European conflict zone,
driving north from Kyiv, the signs of war start to be more visible.
To hard times in Southeast Asia.
I meet a man who has been waiting in line for diesel for 6 days.
To the astonishing beauty of remote places.
My welcome to the waters off of East Greenland has come from 2 whales.
Let us take you there. Listen to the world.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Speakeasy Stage, presenting Swept Away. 4 New Bedford whalers must confront who they are and what they've done as they fight to survive a shipwreck, with music by the Avett Brothers. Opens April 24th. SpeakeasyStage.com. And Direct Federal Credit Union, a Needham-based financial institution providing loans, saving solutions, and financial wellness resources for members across every stage of life. Learn more by visiting direct.com. Direct Federal, member NCUA.
And the Boston Speaker Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, war photographer Lindsay Addario, and former U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns. BostonSpeakers.org.
I'm Callie Crossley. All too often, a lot of very important news flies under the radar. Learn about the small stories before they become big headlines on my podcast, Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 from the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. Very shortly, the other Boston Marathon will be taking over the city. No runners, no Heartbreak Hill. Instead, playwrights, actors, directors, and audiences will be settling in for a different kind of endurance event. The Boston Theater Marathon packs 50 10-minute plays by New England playwrights into a single all-day relay. They're staged by New England theater companies and are hosted by Boston Playwrights Theatre at Boston University. Beyond giving a platform to both aspiring and established playwrights, since it began in 1999, the marathon has served as a meeting ground for artists across the region, and proceeds benefit the Theater Community Benevolent Fund, which provides emergency assistance to members of the region's theater community. Joining me to talk about the short plays, long hours, and the stamina it takes to keep a theater community alive is playwright Nathan Allen Davis, the director of BU's MFA Playwriting Program and associate professor of the practice. Welcome to The Culture Show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, this is such a beloved event because, well, I think it's meeting the moment. Everybody seems to like shorter these days. So we have the Boston Theater Marathon. How many submissions do you get? How do you winnow it down to the 50?
We get about 300 submissions a year, and we have to winnow it down to 50, and that's definitely a challenge. So when the submissions are sent in, they don't have any identifying information. We pass them out to initial readers, responders who score them. We distribute them to theater companies. Ultimately, we select the 50 that we feel are the best fits for that year. And we have a wonderful selection of everything from Kristen Greenidge, who's a Boston-based playwright who's been produced off-Broadway and at the Huntington, to
her opera is about to premiere, Boston Lyric Opera.
That's right. And we also have plays by high school students who are writing their first play. So we get a wonderful array of writing for the marathon.
And is there a theme or a charge each year, or do you just say write a 10-minute play?
Write a 10-minute play. And I would say one of the best things, have you ever been to a play that you don't like? It feels really terrible. And the best part of the Boston Theater Marathon is, this is all very subjective, right? We love some things, we don't like other things. You start a play, you don't like it, it's over 10 minutes later, and a new one's starting. And it's an event that just brings people together, and it's all day long. It goes from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. But of course, you can also purchase tickets for its 2-hour block if you like. And so it's a really wonderful community event.
Well, another wonderful part of this is how a huge array of local theater companies come to be involved. What role, how do they step in staging these 10-minute plays?
Wonderful question. So all the plays, of course, are staged at Boston Playwrights Theatre at 949 Com Ave on BU's campus. And each theater company that produces a play, everyone from places like American Repertory Theater, Trinity Rep, Lyric Stage, Speakeasy, and then some smaller theater companies like Fresh Ink Theater, Front Porch Arts that produced my play last year. And these theater companies, on their own time, will have about 8 weeks to rehearse the play. And of course, the sets have to be relatively minimal. We don't have the ability to bring in an entire, backdrop, so to speak, but we have to be creative with a piece of furniture indicates the location, sound and light cues that are simple but able to be executed. And so each theater will rehearse in their own space or a space they can find. Boston Playwrights Theatre is available the day before for teching and that kind of thing. And then it's go, go, go. And so it's a marathon, but it's a sprint in terms of getting to the product once we have the rehearsals in place.
I'm speaking with Nathan Allen Davis, a playwright, director of BU's MFA playwriting program. We're talking about the Boston Theater Marathon, which is taking place May 3rd, starts at 11 at Boston Playwrights Theatre. As you just mentioned, yours was selected last year. No finger on the scale because, as you said, these are blind submissions,
right.
So no identifying information. How did you approach this task?
Well, I wrote something I thought would be fun. A 10-minute play can be deceptively difficult to write because it's a little bit too short to be a typical short play, like a one-act, but it's also too long to be to sketch. You don't want it to feel like a sketch comedy too much. So the play that I wrote was called A Meeting. It dealt with, I would say, race and work in a way that was absurd and funny, but also had some serious notes and had just two characters. And I just tried to write something that I would want to see, and I had fun with it. And a lot of it was about, for me, trying to kind of choreograph what's the movement between these two people. Where are they when the play starts? How do they leave each other? To think about it sort of visually and relationally, and then you have to just have fun and hope for the best.
How much of a narrative arc would you say you can create in 10 minutes?
You'd be surprised. I've seen plays at the marathon that are really like big stories where somebody gives a whole epic kind of tale in a kind of narrative style. I've seen some that really take place over 10 minutes, as in the time is uninterrupted. So one of the great things about the form is that even though it's a lot of limitations, that also yields a lot of ingenuity and a lot of imagination. So the possibilities are pretty unlimited, but in general, it's just hard to convey a lot of characters or a really big, multi-dimensional story. But you can still get a lot in there if you're able to simplify with the basic action.
Well, I'm thinking, as you're describing this, especially as with your play, a meeting, and if we're eavesdropping at a park bench or in a supermarket or anywhere, I think a lot of us do, especially if you're a journalist, you're an artist, you're a playwright, a novelist. They have all told me on the show over the years that they eavesdrop. Yes. There's a lot that happens in one conversation that you may be sitting on that park bench a lot longer for.
There sure is. I think that a lot of times writing is very much about listening. It's about one of the things that I do when I'm teaching playwriting is that I ask my students to go listen to a conversation and transcribe it and come back. And sometimes what they come back with almost feels like a full scene. And of course, there's an editing process and there's a expansion process and all those things, but sometimes you underestimate what's just there in the world. And so really it's your ear, how you listen, your perspective that is what shapes a play. And to your point, I think when you're able to narrow down the scope and say, okay, well, here's where we are. We're on this bench, we're in this office, we're in this location. That actually yields a lot of freedom because now the audience is glued in and they're locked into the situation, and you can take them anywhere with language. And the magic of theater is that the language of the actors in real time paints the picture for everybody.
Can people contribute monologues as their play?
They can. I mean, there's really not any limitation. So if the play itself is a monologue and it's about 10 minutes long, that's fine. The biggest problem would be if you submit a monologue and it's 10 pages. So typically, we say for a submission for a 10-minute play, it should be about 10 pages, about a page a minute. But if you write a 10-page monologue, you're a little closer to 20 minutes, and then you're over the time limit, and we can't accept it. So you got to be mindful of the time, but certainly monologues are a legitimate form and can be used.
I'm wondering if people are writing in the moment, if they're writing 2025, 2026 for this year's marathon, if there were certain themes that you saw as you went through the hundreds of submissions this year, especially given what's happening in the world right now and what people are processing.
I can't say that there was one particular theme, but I do think that there was a certain intensity and a longing that is expressed in a lot of the writing, a sense of trying to say something about the world. One of the things that we actually did this year is we commissioned a play by two Native writers for the National Day of Theater Readings for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives. And that play is called Badgering. It's by sisters Isabella and Sophia Madrigal, and that'll be part of the marathon. So we specifically commissioned that play for that moment. And I think that anytime you really think about the world, your heart can break a little bit, seeing what's going on, or maybe even a lot. And a lot of times, and I would say this year was no exception, the plays reflect that. But a lot of them also reflect joy, imagination, and sometimes they're all mixed into one. And so the wonderful thing about the marathon is that you're able to see all of those colors reflected, over the course of the day. And it's important, I think, if you're ever seeing a play, you want to get a sense of what does the writer have to say? What do they care about? What are the issues that are really important? And you also want to be able to have moments where you can laugh, where you can remember that life also has joy in it. And even though the marathon is not one play, it covers all of those notes, I would say, by the collection of the voices that we bring in.
Speaking of that, I was very struck to hear about the play commissioned by and about the indigenous community. And it made me wonder, because we don't see a lot of representation of the indigenous community in theater. It's changed somewhat over the last few years. But does the marathon become a springboard for aspiring playwrights, or bringing to the fore stories that we might not always hear, especially in this case?
That's a big part of the hope, because whenever we're doing the marathon, we're pairing a writer with a theater, and the hope is that collaboration might grow, might continue. There's also something about the encouragement that happens when you see your play in front of people, whether or not it's produced again, or whether or not whatever it is. Being a writer is a very lonely thing, And so just the ability to see your play brought to life in front of people can be really galvanizing. But to your point, I would say that indigenous representation on an American stage is a really large gap that the American theater has. And this is one small way that we try to help with that. But it's only one small effort, and a much larger one is definitely needed.
Before we close, I just want to ask you if you could just mention a little bit about what the Theater Community Benevolent Fund is. I know during the pandemic, when theater was completely shut down, this was a fund that was hugely important. So I think almost all the proceeds go to this fund. What does it do?
The Theater Community Benevolent Fund basically is a fund that all theater artists in Boston can appeal to if they face a catastrophic event. A catastrophic event can be medical or can be otherwise. It's if you are in need, you can appeal to the fund for help. And you're correct, all of the proceeds of the marathon go to that fund. And last year we were able to raise over $9,000 for that fund, and we're hoping to do even more this year.
Well, and as you said, people can experience new work. It's audience participation, and that people can help shape new work. If you're laughing a lot, there's success in that play.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with this year's marathon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nathan Allen Davis is a playwright, the director of BU's MFA Playwriting Program, and associate professor of the practice. The Boston Theater Marathon takes place May 3rd, starting at 11 at Boston Playwrights Theatre. To learn more, check out their website. Well, thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. Tune in tomorrow for musician Kiefer Glenshaw on his latest musical, Marathon, performing for 24 hours at Berkeley. Plus, President of Mass Art, Mary Grant, also joins us for her monthly appearance. Thanks to Henry Santoro for curating our Culture Cast. Today's engineer is Bill Piacitelli. The BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, and Pat Lally. Also, thanks to the Newsfeed Cafe. Thank you to everyone who came down to be here with us today. We love seeing you. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
GBH's